Hello and welcome to the Hawks Nest live stream show. Sorry we missed you guys on Sunday there. Just needed kind of a day off from talking this Rust talk that has gone on and on. It's been very depressing and a long-winded affair, but we are rejuvenated. I'm back. And just as I'm sort of getting around to dealing with this Rust talk that just never will end or go away or seems to be reaching a head, now we get to open up this offseason. The week of what I have termed the beginning of an offseason of the Great Cuttening, where, according to general manager leaks throughout the league, there's going to be just a massive onslaught of free agents that nobody thought was going to be reaching the market that are suddenly cut as teams slice and dice their way to getting up underneath the salary cap. Well, our Seahawks decide, as they are wont to do, to be the first ones to enter into this fray, making a very major cut of Carlos Dunlap, a guy who came along last season and really sparked the Seahawks defense, really turned that pass rushing unit around from being what I would probably say was a league worst, if not one of the league worst units, into a unit that was above being respectable, if not one of the better units in the league. And while not one player is going to turn that all around, certainly some of the young guys developed a little bit along, and that was nice to see. Jamal Adams came back from an injury. He stood front and center as the guy that really was the thrusting force behind that. He is everything we needed there as a pass rusher that we weren't having. A guy that could get you consistent pass rush while also playing the run, not just a one-trick pony, if you were. And then he showed off a skill that it's been a while since we've seen here in Seattle, since maybe the days of a Michael Bennett or a Cliff Averill. That being the ability of a professional pass rusher to go get a sack when they need to get a sack, when the team desperately needs them to go get a sack. Saw this in the Cardinal game when you needed to stop, when you needed to play. Fourth down, here he comes. Makes the play, makes the sack, game over, shut it down, moving on back to Seattle. Same thing in the Washington football game. Again, when you needed a sack, a timely play made. Here he is in the backfield making that play at just the right moment. So when it came to this offseason, though, you could understand he was certainly going to clear a lot of cap space if you did release him. And cap space is at an absolute vital this particular offseason. That $14 million this offseason is really like in real-world cap dollars of recent previous seasons, probably sitting in more of the realm of like $20 million in equivalency. So it is a lot of money to save, essentially, to release him there. But now you're back in the same boat we were in last offseason, where you have no pass rush, no certain pass rush. You have prospects. You got guys with high ceilings and low floors, but you just don't quite have the certainty, the professional pass rusher, the guy that's going to get the job done in more ways than one. And this is why this move has struck me as odd a little bit, disconcerting a little bit. And it's going to be hard to necessarily point towards exactly the impetus behind why this move was made. Was this a move made to create cap space for Russell Wilson and a trade for Russell Wilson? Because if you move on with $39 million, you're theoretically going to have to, or not move on for $39 million, but take the $39 million dead money hit. You're going to have to take that hit immediately. And so henceforth, you will need to then create that cap space in order to get that done. $14 million provides you one of the first big building blocks to getting to that point, certainly. And you didn't have a guy on this roster who necessarily was going to create that amount of cap space by releasing him. So it would make sense from that vein of it. It would make sense from in the vein of it of if Seattle feels like this great cutting period that I've described is going to see them having 2-3 players that they can squeeze into that $14 million salary, and the cumulative of those 3 players is going to be better than the equivalency of Carlos Dunlap. It could also be that. It could be that they just want to maintain the cap flexibility to make any kind of moves they want to make throughout the offseason, because this is not going to be just a free agency period. Free agency period ends, draft comes up, draft ends, and then, okay, we're on to the season. We've seen through recent years that period post-free agency and there being guys out on the open market has increased and gotten longer and longer right up until the end of training camp now. You'll have guys out there available on the market, and this year even more so. So maybe it is just to create that extra cap space. Again, though, I get disconcerted because I go back to last year when you lose Clowney and you essentially said, okay, the money we spent on Clowney, let's divvy that up between Benson Mayowa and Bruce Irvin. And between them, one had 7 sacks the previous year and one like 6 sacks or something. That's like 14 sacks. That's more than Clowney's 3.5 sacks. But their cumulative impact, albeit that Irvin was injured, that just didn't really work out as exactly as you sort of drew that one up. And I would hope that they don't go down to that bargain basement level again, but rather actually try to find a quality pass rusher whose value is simply just a little bit depressed. Hard to say where this move makes on this. I will definitely get over to you guys here in the chat. I see we're already blowing up a little bit. Hard to say what this move means in that respect. It could mean any of these number of these things that are going on, any number of these things. We'll have to just wait and see how the rest of the week and the rest of these next couple of weeks play out to really get more of a sure answer. But if you're going to go into this next, I can't think they will, but if you're going to talk about going into this next season with, okay, we'll go get Ryan Kerrigan and he'll give us the impact, and then he's only going to want like a $3 million deal, and then we'll just count on Alton Robinson, Rasheem Green, LJ Collier, or Darrell Taylor to bring the equivalency. Like, that's just not going to be a pathway to getting you the pass rush you need to make this defense function. I've gone back on it over and over again in that, look, okay, this is what we are. We're 4-300 defense. We really don't want to blitz a lot. We really shouldn't blitz a lot in our schematics. And by the personnel that we've gone out and scouted for this particular schematics who don't necessarily have pass rush as their forte. I'm okay with that. So embrace it then, front office. Embrace it, coaching staff. You need a front four that can generate pressure. You see Tampa Bay last year with the front four and what they could do there and how that helped them out. All 4 of those guys are a threat down there. And the days back, as I've talked about even recently with the NASCAR package, going back to the 2012, 13, 14 days when you could really stack up the pass rushers out there. We are a far cry from that as we currently stand. Alton Robinson's an interesting prospect. He might really develop. I'm not counting on him. Darrell Taylor's got a studding rod in his leg, or maybe not a rod in the leg, but his leg's still a little dodgy. We don't really know. Not wanting to count on him. Rasheem Green has yet to pop off consistently in any aspect of his game. The better route to go is to have more certainty out there, especially on the edges. If you can't do it at the defense act, at least on the edges. But we will see how this adds into this. The Russell Wilson talks, I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about that. I'm not going to try to bury you guys too much with too much Russell Wilson talk because I don't think there's a lot really to talk about at the end of the day. Something is happening in the background. We don't know what it is. It's ever more and more, if you were to listen to the national media, it's almost all but a foregone conclusion right now that Russell's gone. I don't know that it's that necessarily. I will say that there are worrying signs for those of you that are hoping Russell Wilson remains. You're not getting a lot of ammo for your gun. You're not getting a lot of that. Well, look to this and look to that. And that those are obviously indicators that he just wants to stay. And this is all just a media creation of the offseason. I think that it's getting harder and harder to say that by the silence of the front office at the Seahawks. But of course, Russell Wilson submitting the teams he'd be trading to by those teams out there then saying, yeah, we might be interested in bringing him in. That might be interesting. That could work. That could work. It's worrisome, and we're moving closer and closer, I think, to this period where we might be getting some bad news here within the next week or two. I did not think it was likely to happen, even up to a couple weeks ago, that this thing, there's no way, maybe a year from now. Maybe a year from now, but not now. No way, not now. But yeah, maybe now. Maybe now we are going to see this happen. And it is looking, I don't think it's just a national media creation. I think that the front office's silence, people are going to bring up that letter that was sent out to the season ticket holders that was excluding Russell. I don't read as much into that necessarily as other people have. But just the silence of the front office. They're not coming back and just, Russell's our guy. This is all just silly talk. Nothing's going to happen of this. He's here for now and the future. There's no way we'd ever take $39 million dead money. No NFL team in the league would ever do that, nor would we. We don't have any of that coming down the pike quite yet. We'll see if it comes down. Let's pop over to you guys over in the chat and see what you got, see what's on your mind. I do appreciate you watching. Please do slam that like button if you happen to be in here watching right now or in the future. Maxwell, how you doing, Maxwell? What's up, Nathaniel, Bash, Slim Dog? Hello. Thanks for jumping on in, guys, on the surprise stream. Thought I'd try to do a little makeup stream here for you guys because I missed Sunday. Randall, hello. I had to do a double take when I saw the show come across. I got to keep you on your toes, Randall. Every once in a while, I got to surprise you. 283128 says, I hope we sign Aldon Smith. I would be very happy with that as a signing. And again, that's a part of this, I think, that we've got to acknowledge with this. I mentioned a couple of scenarios of how this affects this, how this affects that. there's a likely scenario here where it affects you're going to be able to go out and get 3 players that are so far and away above just the one player alone here that it makes sense. Whereas Aldon Smith, what's his market? It's not $14 million a year. I'll tell you that. It's not a whole bunch of years. This is probably a short-term deal. He's going to make a little bit of money, but it's probably into that maybe $6 million territory, $5 million territory potentially. Maybe a little more, but boy, that's somebody signing him off of just 1 year of good production, but not amazing production. But he would be a guy I'd like a lot to A3 because I think he's going to round back into football shape another year into it. And I thought he looked really good with the Cowboys last year. Always liked Aldon as a player. It was all about him with just being ahead, but he's always a freakish talent. Spud Homer, so what are the odds we bring Dunlap back? No one likes to get fired, then brought back to the same company for less pay. Yeah, there does seem to be some of this, Spud, that, and this is a little unconfirmed. These are reports we're hearing out there in the, again, unconfirmed, but this is what we're hearing. And that when Seattle made the trade for Dunlap, they restructured Carlos's deal so that he could fit underneath the cap last year, underneath Seattle with the cap last year, because they were getting pretty close to it. In restructuring that deal, reportedly speaking, he went to the front office and said, okay, I'll restructure this, but you've got to allow me to become a free agent at the end of the offseason if we can't get a contract extension put together past the 1 year. I want to have an opportunity to get out there. You don't get a franchise tag me or do something like that. I'm going to get a chance to go out there and do that. Not franchise. He'd had 1 more year of $14 million on his deal at that point, but he would get that chance if they couldn't come up to that extension point. I think that sounds likely. The fact that they've released him now, for instance, I'm sure many of you are wondering, well, if this is the Great Cuttening, why aren't we seeing more players cut right now? Instead, we're seeing the franchise tag being handed out like just like a prize package to everybody, like a swag bag at the Oscars. Everybody's getting the franchise tag. I would say not all teams are as player friendly as Seattle is. Seattle's giving Dunlap an early jump start on this to get out there and get him in there as opposed to having the late start out on this. And this cutting period is going to really last because you're going to have a lot of teams that are going to try to wait to release certain guys right up until the end period, hoping that they don't have a market out there so that they can come back home. Come back home, baby. I know. They didn't want you now, and we just couldn't quite afford you, but we want you back now, but just half. Speaking a little bit to what you're talking about, with the fact no one usually likes to come back for less pay, but maybe teams will hope this year, being this weird, anomalous year where there'll be so many players out there on the market that will happen, and maybe Seattle is counting on that. I'm not, historically speaking, Spud. These guys tend to go like you just spoke of. They tend to be gone. And I think that some team out there will look at his production over last year. And when he came from Cincinnati, came to Seattle, I think he was a revitalized player. I think he went from a loserville for nearly a decade to now suddenly he's got a chance to compete for championships. And you saw maybe a second wind here to his career. And I think some team out there could do that math and throw him some decent money. Say, hey, okay, we think you can do this for a couple years. We'll throw you the 3-year, $35 million deal, and he ends up with $20 million guaranteed or something like that. I could see a team buying into that. You watched the tape on him last year. He was a fantastic player for us. Really good player. We can't undersell that fact. It was one of the reasons why I was okay with holding on to that $14 million, even knowing what you could kind of get accomplished with the $14 million, was just because, man, we've had no certainties on that defensive line, especially at the edge. The edge has been this grand question mark. Kind of going for years now, where we only can have one good one at a time, and even the good one we have, there's always some questions surrounding him. Frank Clark has run defense and consistency as a pass rusher. Jadeveon Clowney in the health. No Ziggy Ansah. Now we've got a guy that works, and we know he can do good. It fits within the scheme. You can still pair him up against Taylor. Taylor could still go out there and be the Leo at that point because Dunlap's the guy that's going to be on the other side. He's the left defensive end. It took the pressure off LJ Collier from having to be the guy. I don't know. Brian, how you doing, Brian Hoing? Nope, the Hawks could sign a great offensive lineman. That's true. Brian, you're absolutely right, man. I forgot the last fourth scenario is that they clear his money to sign Corey Lindsey or to sign Joe Thuney, who thankfully has not been one of those guys that has been franchise tagged. Fantastic point, Brian. Sorry, I forgot that part. But you are correct. It could be that they're freeing assets up from one spot to put into the offensive line, and they're just going to ride or die with those young guys that they got out there. Randall says, Brandon's about to do an emergency broadcast. He's got insider info on Russ being dealt. Yeah, I don't know if I'd want that insider info, Randall. I don't. Even if I got it, I don't know if I'd want it. That would be the because you know how the term "kill the messenger," you know, like that. It would be just, I don't know, man. But I will say that in the last couple of days, essentially for me, there's been this odd turn, just sort of listening to the conversation, thinking about the conversation, the myriad of reporters that have entered into this with some take or some background knowledge that they're intimating. It sure does lead me to believe that there's something going on here. It sure does lead me to believe that whether or not it full on will reach a point of there being a trade, that there are negotiations ongoing, that they're probably going pretty deep. I'm certainly making a big guess here, and I don't know. And there's a lot of folks say this. There's 0% chance. There's no chance. This can't happen. No chance under God this happens. I hope they're right. I hope they're right. I was the one hope I'd had with all this was just give one more year to try to get this thing all back together again. One more year to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. One more year to put the glue in the right places and maybe just get the good offensive line, get him this stuff, and then he can make him happy again. Just one more. That would be at the best. But boy, there's been such a somber, morose narrative to this throughout the whole time that it's been ongoing. There's just been none of those sparks of life. Where's the Pete Carroll interview talking about, just his love for him, and I want him here forever. And now it's just this, he can see no other quarterback through the rest of his NFL career. I mean, how quickly would that shut these things down? How quickly would those close these rumors down? Immediately to me, but nothing. Thomas Cox, who will they sign with the Dunlap money? Well, I think Brian Hoying has a pretty good point, being that they can go get the offensive lineman. I would say that they believe overall with the money, they're going to be able to fit at least two upper level players in with the single player they get with Dunlap. I think that that's what they're sort of counting on here. So if they can go get Von Miller for $8 million a year and then go sign a very good offensive lineman that they can lower the first year's cap hit down to $7-8 million and combo that in to get to the $14 million point, they say, well, look, now we've got a starting Alex Mack at center and Von Miller. Is that better than Carlos Dunlap? And probably you're making your offensive line better. I think we can all agree that's a better thing. I don't know if Alex Mack's the best player to use for that. I don't think he's exactly who they would target. There's some other centers out there, maybe Andrews, but they would improve the position. So I would think that they would probably go between those two. You're probably looking at an edge rusher with one of them, and then I would think an offensive line with the other. Seahawks, Jose Rodriguez. Hey, Jose, how you doing? Cut Reed? I mean, they may. If they're going this route, they're going to be willing, Jose, to cut Dunlap, and they see him as not worth the money at $14 million on a one-year deal. How would they see the $8.6 million savings of Jaron Reed this year? Again, you're creating a new hole by doing that, just like the hole you've created with Dunlap. But is there a cheaper option out there? Can you talk Ndamukong at 34 years old to come back to Seattle on a one-year, $5 million deal, take the $3.6 million, apply it to the money saved off Dunlap, and call it a day? Yeah, you could. You could try something like that. I wish I had faith. I don't know about you, Jose. I don't have a ton of faith right now that they're going to execute it that smartly. I hope they do. I need a little bit of faith. Sean M., is Darrell Taylor healthy yet? Yes, Sean M., he is healthy enough to play at this point. Whether or not he sustains, whether or not there's some lingering strange pain in his leg, like when they say somebody gets an arm amputated, they still feel the tickle on their fingers that aren't there. Maybe he still feels some weird echo of the injury. That seemed to be a part of what held him out here, Sean, is that he should have been able, by all accounts, to be able to get back to the field, but there was a sort of strange lingering pain and discomfort kind of there in the leg. By the end of the season, he was practicing. By the playoff time, he was practicing, not to the point ready to get on the field. But Carroll said he was bouncing around out there and looked really good. And certainly the team is very high on him as a player and thought last year he was going to be able to come in and have an immediate impact that they weren't counting on Rasheem Green coming in and having. That I don't know that they were necessarily counting on L.J. Collier coming in and having, at least as far as the pass rush goes. Cappy McCappy says, tell Russ to take a pay cut like Brady if he really wants to win. It's one of the great debates of this offseason, Cappy. One that I have entered into often here on the stream and in the chat. And the argument seems to kind of boil down to a couple different places. I try to understand both sides of it. Certainly the side I linger on being, 30 years of data tells us that anything over about 10%, and you're not going to win a Super Bowl. And that's what 30 years of pretty concrete data tells us. And then we go last year, only 2 quarterbacks take a discount. In the NFL were the 2 quarterbacks who got to the Super Bowl. And the Chiefs and Mahomes contract that he just signed, the 10-year, $500 million deal, that's this new pace setter for the league, right? The new pace setter for the league. Yet the first year cap hit last year was like 2.5%. Next year's cap hit percentage is like 5.9. Then it goes up to like 11%. Doesn't even get over to 15% until by about the 4th year, which by that point the cap will have raised up and it'll have lowered back down to around the 10%, if not lower territory. They built the contract almost like they were very keenly aware of this metric and stat that I talk about. The other side of it, of course, is the folks that stand on this other side, and they are a passionate crowd who say there's no reason for him to take a discount. Why should he ever take a discount? That's not on him. And just because he took a discount, that doesn't mean that the front office would utilize those resources appropriately anyway. They haven't up until this point. They had $50 million to spend last year, and they mucked it up. Why would they muck anything else up from the money they take out of my wallet? Okay. The other thing that they'll say is, well, look at Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan was making a huge percent of the salary cap. He would have broken that whole 20, 30-year metric if not for the fact that he had this epic collapse. So then there's a quarterback or two in that they point to that are in that realm where they lost in the Super Bowl, but they could have won it, but they didn't win it. And it's kind of like, this is where we get to semantics on stuff a little bit. But that's basically how that conversation boils down to. I can't be won over to that side of it when they can't really find an example that they can utilize as to why it's okay to pay a quarterback that amount of money. Quarterbacks that come this close aren't winning the Super Bowl any more than Aaron Rodgers, who didn't win the Super Bowl this year, getting to the conference championship game, or Drew Brees this year, who got to the conference championship game. It's still not winning a Super Bowl. And I still do go as that's our metric as a franchise, man. That's what we're trying to get done here. That's the goal at hand. That should be what everybody's looking towards is the goal. And I think that's my audio's bad. Oh, my audio's okay. Chico, I should have good audio. Everybody else seems, I think they're hearing me. Yeah. Matthias 23451. How you doing, Matthias? And hello, Chico. Do you think the Hawks feel they can sign 1 or 2 elite defensive line rushers with this $14 million dual would have had instead of resigning him to that amount? Yeah, I don't know if I get the impression the re-signing him thing just wasn't really a trek, not because necessarily the Hawks front office wouldn't have been willing to do it, but you have to think that Carlos Dunlap probably wanted to go out there and test those free agent waters. He just got to see a guy in J.J. Watt who's a year older than him and who had, you could say, feasibly a little bit less production than Carlos Dunlap had, especially if you counter it last season coming over when he got out of the Cincinnati Bengals doghouse over there, that maybe he can go out there and find a similar deal to what Watt was able to get. Now, I don't think he's going to be able to get that deal. I think Watt carries a big name, and that's going to a little bit as sort of the name signing of things. But maybe he feels he can do that. Yeah, I think they are counting Matthias on the 2-player factor. What you're talking about, whether it's 2 defensive end, defensive tackle, or 2 defensive ends that are just both capable. I mean, you could grab a Ryan Kerrigan and a Justin Houston, and then still have some money left over signing those 2 guys. You could get into that level of just 2 really veteran-y pass rushers, and then go that route instead of the one certain guy. And hey, that hedges your bets a little bit. That builds you in against some injury then. That doesn't put all of your eggs in one Dunlap basket. So it makes some sense if that's the route they're going to go. Hard to say that that's the direction they take yet, though, Matthias, because it could be, as we're saying, one of these kind of 4 things that this cut means. I don't think anybody can say for sure that they can read into exactly what the cut means. Thomas Cox says Russ won't take a pay cut. I agree. There's been no indicators that are out there that would indicate that he is willing to take a pay cut. Maxwell says, what's with the Seahawks cutting their best pass rushers? I don't know. They sometimes, it's weird. They can target veteran pass rushers on the open market and find guys that work in their system that'll be good functional pass rushers for the most part. Ziggy Ansah wasn't the best of moves, but Mayo was all right last year. I mean, he was what we thought he'd be. Veteran who can stable presence. He'll make a play here or there. But they just aren't able to keep these guys in here for very long. Sheldon Richardson in and out, Jadeveon Clowney in and out, Carlos Dunlap in and out. Just not a lot of, it's not super important at that position to have year in and year out the same guys there necessarily. Can't hurt all the time having a little bit of, what is the thing, the offensive line, I'm trying to think of the word, but continuity. Just having the continuity on that defensive line to learn each other and get better by your learning, as opposed to everybody constantly being in a state of, wait, so when I run the stunt up over your right shoulder, you want me to give you an extra step because I'm going to click the back of your heels because you like to get a little bit lower. Little idiosyncrasies that you learn playing along with somebody over the course of a couple seasons. That's on me. I think the Seahawks are going to make a blockbuster trade in the next week or so. That's why we're letting these guys go for cap space. I do lean towards that being the number one reason for this happening. That's on me. Hard to think after all of the recent years since Frank Clark left, and even when Frank Clark left in that year, you were having pass rush problems. Yeah, Clark got you a good statistical year from rushing the passer, but it was him and Jaron Reed and really not a lot else on that defensive line back in, 2017 or something. And this has kind of continued and gone on 2018. And then, 19, you got still, again, only Jadeveon Clowney with the 3 sacks and nothing else really out there. And then this last year, you would think that if they're going to make a move like this where they do cut away from a guy like that at this point, that they've got some kind of plan in place or something else that's more pressing as to push this forward, because this does create such a hole that's not only a big hole in the team, but it's been a big hole in the team now for a while. Nathaniel says we didn't use our franchise tag on anyone. No, it's hard to do it on the cornerbacks because it's top 5 of the position is what it factors out to what the cost is going to be on a franchise tag. So you're looking across the league right now, and safeties are getting the short end of the shiv big time. Marcus May, Williams there in the Saints, they're getting franchised because those guys are going to get franchised at like a $10 million deal. That's from a team standpoint, they get a prime season of safety play at $10 million. Okay. But if you go to do that at the corner market, I think you're going to be up somewhere in the neighborhood of like $16, $17 million per season. 1 year, franchise tag, 1 year, $17 million. Same thing's true for defensive ends. The cost is just really exorbitant. So you just can't quite do it there. Seattle could have theoretically done it with a guy like Chris Carson, but I don't think that they want to carry that cap hit, even with it being as low as it would be about around $10 million or so. And I think Carson might have been fairly, when he looks at it, not too upset with a franchise tag if he would have gotten it this year either, because I don't know what his market's necessarily going to be like. But, yep, nobody was going to get it this year. Dylan Bronco likes the mustache. Thanks, Dylan. I'm in Hawaii here, so I'm working on my Magnum PI look here. I'm gonna unveil one of these streams. I'm gonna whip out the Hawaiian shirt. I'm gonna be rocking the Trident Mariner cap, not the Detroit Lion cap, because screw Detroit Lions. It'll be a Mariner Trident cap, and it's gonna be a full-on must. It's gonna be a full-on mustache, Dylan. Just thick Selleck style, man. Down to the bottom part of my top lip. Jays, how you doing, Jays? Randall, Carson, and Shaq gone for sure. Yeah, I think it was no shocker here for me, Randall. I don't think from you either on that one. I think we'll get some comp picks. Cut players don't count against the comp equation, right? Yeah, you could very well. I would expect both of those guys. The key with the Randall is, as we saw last year with Jadeveon and getting comp back for him, because we're not going to get a comp back for Clowney and signing with the Titans last year. If they wait past, I think it's the May 1st period. If you wait past the May 1st date, I believe, then it doesn't count any longer as far as against the compensatory game. Does Will Carson and Shaq want to wait that long to get paid out on that open market? Like Clowney, who had already gotten paid before, could afford to kind of sit and wait and kind of hold things out a bit. I don't think so. I think they will be paid. So this would be, it's a sound insight on this, Randall, in that you'll probably see Seattle look to target specifically waived players first and foremost, as opposed to street free agents, traditional free agents, because of the fact that the waived players don't count against the compensatory cap. Matthias 23451 says, also, what's the likelihood we resign Dunlap now? I like the news about not franchising Shaq or Carson. Not franchising Shaq and Carson was a very smart thing by the front office to do, not to do. And at least we've had an offseason of not really great indicators coming right now from this football club. That's a good indicator that they didn't go that route, overvaluing their own players, which is what that would have been a sign if they had done that. So it is smart on their part. Unfortunately, Matthias, I don't think Dunlap's coming back. When you have a guy in a contract, when you release that guy, it's very few and far between guys that then do come back to the team that released him, especially when you don't have a lot of history with him. It's only 1 year. It's not like you're the team that drafted him and there's a lot of nostalgia and sentimentality, I can't say that word, attached to the situation. Jay says, nice, we're not 3 hours into the stream. You got me still fresh and bubbly. Maxwell Pern, I've been looking at Pitts, and damn, he is amazing. Pitts. Florida Pitts. Sorry. Yeah, he's legitimately the tight end from Florida is legitimately freakish. He's the best tight end prospect to come out. Man, I'd have to go back years to find the last guy that came out that is this just elite of a player. He's a guy, if you were just drafting, probably based upon, pure talent and ability, and it's not the positional weighted stuff. Quarterbacks can be weighted over everything else, et cetera. He'd probably be one of the top 2-3 players in this draft overall. The Pitts kid from Florida. You can play him at tight end, you could put him out at wide receiver, and he'll probably be just fine over there as well. I mean, his catch radius is ridiculous. Athletic as hell, great hands, great feel for the game. Not a lot not to like with Pitts, other than maybe he's not a great blocker as a tight end, but he's such a phenomenal pass catcher in this modern age. It's not going to matter as much, especially if he gets into the right offense. Cappy says, then Russ will never get close to Brady. Yeah, it may be one of those markers you in hindsight 2020 Russ looks at. I've kind of maintained one of the things that's going to be a little bit tough for us Seahawks fans to maybe stomach when this all comes to pass is Russ gets traded to a new team and then signs a new deal and then takes a discount on the new team. That's going to be the one that's going to stick in everybody's craw just right. That would be a tough one, wouldn't it? But I do agree. I mean, until we get more data showing us that consistently, that means more than a one-off. That means more than a team that's almost got a Super Bowl but lost at the last second because of an epic collapse. Well, did that epic collapse happen because of a lack of talent, because you were paying that quarterback that amount of money? So until we consistently get a quarterback making over 20% of the cap, 25% of the cap, and winning Super Bowls taking up that amount of cap, I'm going to rely on the other data we have that's pretty universal, pretty consistent in what the story it's telling us, but you got to keep that thing under 10%, basically. It sucks. It'd be great to have your quarterback forever. It'd be the thing of fairy tales and wonderment, but it's not the reality of the situation. It's not the reality of life in the NFL, unfortunately. That's on me. Plus, I'm tired of these mediocre seasons we've been having since LOB and Beast Mode left. We need to just start from scratch and find our identity again. Agreed. That's on me. I think that there's a great argument to be made for doing that. This is part of the thing I've maintained with is that I don't want to see Russell moved on from. I just want to see one vision being written out here. I think two visions or two opposing visions at the top just cause a disconnect and a fracturing a little bit in the way that you go about things. And I think you're just much smarter to just, even if it's a vision that's going to fail out and burn out, well, then let it burn out and fail out. At least we'll see that. There's no excuses that, well, my quarterback wanted to go cooking, so I couldn't run my defense the way I wanted to run them. So, I mean, can't really blame me, man. I mean, what do you want me to do? I don't want that. So there's a part of me that is intrigued at the process of going back to what we're trying to do as a team, what Carroll wants to do in the philosophy of building a team, what Schneider probably wants in lockstep to do in that respect, and see how that plays out. Again, it could fail, but like you, I'm in the camp of being just a consistent winner with the knowledge that consistent winning comes at the price of not making the Super Bowl is not something that necessarily satisfies me as a fan. Doesn't mean I don't enjoy watching the football games or still root for my team. It just means in a general sense that I'm a little bit disconnected from the process when it's so cynical as to never believe it can reach the promised land because it's just like really hard, man. It's like super competitive, Randall says, do you think teams really tell players to test the market but give us the right to match? If so, I bet more times than not the player doesn't come back. I think, there's times that does happen legitimately, Randall. And I think both sides probably do keep their promise, but I think more often than not, the team has no intention of matching in that sense, right? Like they're counting on the fact that the offer that's going to be gotten out there is going to be reduced. And so they'll come back to them and be like, yeah, we'll match that offer. That's the offer we were offering you. We're glad you finally got to see that the market is what it is. But hey, okay, we want to give you $5 million. You go on the market, you make $8 million. And then you come back, hey, how about, okay, well, will you match the $8 million? Do you see how I'll get that? We didn't think you were going to get that. So we'll just, that's good money. You should take that. Can't say no to that. I think it's more of the way that's how it plays out, Randall. But I do think that there's an opening there where they do truly give each other a back and forth on it. So Stream's loving the beard. Love it, Maxwell. Awesome. We'll get a growing beard. I'll grow my Gandalf beard, my Harry Potter beard. Nathaniel, do you think that we could get a Dunlap plus Clowney for that $14 million? Hard to see Dunlap coming back at this point, in my opinion, Nathaniel. Hard. I think somebody's going to pay him. I think he'll make the equivalent of the money he would have made here, probably a little more guaranteed money in totality. Probably not a lot higher than the $14 million on the seasonal basis, but he'll get a multi-year deal. And it may have even been a deal that Seattle was somewhat willing to offer, but he just wanted to get to the open market to see what was out there. Maybe he doesn't really want to be playing as well up in the Pacific Northwest, and that this is far from home and he doesn't want to play that far away. A lot of factors here at play, Nathaniel, with it that are hard to press down with that. But yeah, you could get, Clowney shouldn't make more than really, Clowney's top end to me shouldn't be more than like a 2-year, $16 million deal at the most, really. And it's probably further below that. So $5 to $8 million a year is what you really are looking at on Clowney right now. Too many injury histories, not enough production. Last 2 years, he's essentially lost a lot of his seasons due to injury. I think that's going to weigh in on the market as it weighed in last year, where teams were very hesitant on him to jump into those waters, and the Titans did. But a lot of that was his internal relationship that he had with the head coach, Mike Vrabel, there to help facilitate that type of thing. Without a Vrabel as a head coach, is there that same market for Clowney out there that he got last year? I don't know. I don't think so. Pat Bush, how you doing, Pat? He says, imagine Jimmy G to the Patriots, Wilson to Bears, and Kyler Murray to Houston. Goff is already in Detroit. All new QBs in the NFC West in 2021. Yeah, it's and then I guess, Pat, what you're saying in there is that you would then get Deshaun Watson would go to the Cardinals at that point, which is a recent trade that's come up that's very intriguing. It's intriguing, and it's got to be intriguing from the Texans standpoint, in the respect of, Murray's a developing quarterback, still with a lot of top end potentially here. Younger quarterbacks, not yet getting paid like Watson's getting paid. Yeah, maybe you could get a little bit of assets back in return if you're Houston for Kyler, even with Watson included at that point, like an additional first-round pick in addition or something. It's a trade that could be out there. It looks like Carolina's starting to circle Houston a little bit. Like they're circling the wagons around Houston to try to make them the big offer here. But it could get very interesting with the way that this NFC West plays out. It just shows you the competitiveness of it, Pat, doesn't it? Every team in this division, as I spoke to last week, is going for it. They're just head down, driving forward. Every team's pedal to the metal. Don't worry about the 5-year plan. There's only today. There's only the now. I have to beat this team here and it's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy. I usually have a lot of debate throughout the NFL, throughout my lifetime, as far as what the toughest division is, and a lot of factoring that'll go into play. And like, well, that division got to play through these teams and this, so they're not as. But year after year, you hear about our division and them saying, toughest division football, hands down, tough division football. We got a lot of, Cappy doesn't like Clowney. Well, on a low-end deal, Cappy. On a low-end deal, man, it'd be intriguing. Sean M., what's the cost for Alden Smith? Probably very similar to what a Clowney deal would look like. I think probably a 2-year $10 million deal, 2-year $13 million deal, $6-7 million guaranteed, something like that. In other off seasons, I might go a little higher for him, but I think this particular off season is going to depress his value, Sean, especially because when you look at the free agent market, when we look right now, as we stand, this was This is before the cutting. This is before guys like Dunlap and the Moore are going to enter this mix. This list that I'm going to read off to you is going to double, maybe even triple. And I'm only pointing to defensive linemen, edge rushers here. That's all I'm pointing to on this list. Leonard Williams just got franchised. We got Clowney, Justin Houston, Yannick Ngakoue, Ryan Kerrigan, Ndamukong Suh, Everson Griffin, Autry from the Colts, solid rusher. Kerry Hyder from the 49ers, a very underrated pass rusher from them going on the open market. Romeo Okawara from the Detroit Lions. Sheldon Rankins, a 3-tech defensive tackle with the New Orleans Saints. Corey Peters, interesting guy from the Cardinals, been a little bit beat up recently. Von Miller, Melvin Ingram, Judon, Bud Dupree, Shaq Barrett, Olivier Vernon, Hassan Reddick, Leonard Floyd. These are just the guys that are scheduled to be free agents, not the free agents that are going to come with my cutting thing that I'm talking about. So I certainly think there's going to be a lot of guys out that's going to depress that value down. It just will. It just will. Brian says, could or should they get Joe Thuney? Brian, at the start of this offseason, that was one of my beginning places in the hopes, Brian, of bringing back Russell Wilson into the fold, of hopes of dropping an olive branch down to him and saying, okay, here's our first major signing of the offseason, and it's an offensive lineman. It's not a defensive end. It's not a pass rusher. It's not a defensive tackle, not a linebacker, not a safety. Nope, we're going to get you what you're asking for. We're going to listen to you. We're going to let you see that we want to do right by you. Here is Joe Thuney, one of the better left guards in the league, a guy that does not give up pressure. No one is going to give up. He's not giving up pressure over there. He's just a block. I think he'd be a guy that they would look at and target, Brian. He'd be a guy that also fits within Waldron's scheme in that he's a movement-based guard, a guy that can get out in space and pull, get down to the second level. He's not just going to be a man-on-man monster that Seattle sort of looked to most recently in their offensive linemen. So he would help also in the transition with getting over in here to the new offensive coordinator and what he wants, how he wants to build the offensive lineup. Chico, Brandon, what about Meghan Markle? She's the female Mark Rogers, I think. Yeah. I don't know, Chico. I got to be careful on this. I think I'm already getting accused of being misogynistic on the channel with the Yoko Ono's stuff on Sierra. I don't know anything about the royal family, so I know she's married to Harry, and she seems a little unhappy. But it's about all I got on that one, man. I'm American, we got some things here with it just where I don't have any love lost for the crown. Nathaniel says our offense can't be expected to score 35 points a game, so get a good pass rush. Nathaniel, this is where I'm at with it too. I mean, I harped on it last season. They ignored it. I'll harp on it here again. The two places that I begin, and then the next spot that I hit are going to be offensive line and defensive line this offseason. I think those are the places that you can really, really build this up a little bit. It'll help out the whole rest of the team. Thomas Cox says, what do you think of Wilson and Wagner being left off the season ticket info? Lockett was left off as well. If all of them end up not on the team next year, we would certainly know then that meant that if you find your butt on the not named in the newsletter out to the season ticket holders, you better start packing your bags and put the house on the market. I'll say that. You add up the numbers that are at play here too. So you save $14 million with Dunlap. You save about $10 million with Bobby Wagner. So that's $24 million. And you save about $11 million with Lockett. So that puts you at about $35.5 million. So if what you were needing to do with this Russell Wilson trade was reach the point of clearing $39 million to make the trade happen, those three guys would facilitate that. So I mean, I don't know. I'm not trying to, like I said, I don't read too much into the season ticket info thing too much. I think they were just doing some kind of vein about new players, or I don't even know what. It was Lockett. Maybe it was Adams that got left off. There was a couple of guys left off, but I don't think we can read too much into that necessarily. Boom Shakalak, I'm just joining. Also pissed off about Dunlap. Yeah, I'm not happy about Boom Shakalak. I hope I'm going to wait to see the plan. Randall, I saw you got a shout out by Brady Henderson for having your patience with this Dunlap thing and not going to overboard. So I'll try to take a page from your book and remain patient with this one and just sort of go, okay. No, it's fine. No, it's fine. They got a plan. They got a plan. There's a big plan in place. It's a big picture. It's a big picture plan. It's a real far-ranging, far-out big picture plan. I just got to trust it. So I'm going to trust the process for now and not freak out. But I do reserve the right to freak out if this offseason starts going completely sideways, downhill, and backwards. Uwe, how you doing, Uwe? We won't the direction of the team until the first week of free agency. Dunlap move could be any number of things. Too early to tell. Agreed. Randall, will we really see more 1-year deals, or will teams do 2-year deals so they can spread the bonus out? Basically 1-year deals, but spread over 2 in a sense. I would think it would be what you're going to see is a big bag of those type of deals, Randall, but then you're going to see 3, 4, 5-year deals then cut down to just a bare minimum as well. So those things will probably split the board in a 50-50 type fashion. There'll be a little bit more of the 1-year deals with players being like, let's just get through the woods this year. And let's just hope and pray something gets back up to the right section of things next year. So it'll be more 1-year deals, but no one I think is going to be handing out any 3 or 4-year deals, really. Not very often. A couple here, a couple there. Seattle will probably be one of those deals with Jamal Adams. They'll probably, kick it that direction. But I don't think there's going to be a lot of them necessarily. I think teams and players are going to be able to reserve because teams aren't going to offer big money on the 4-year contract when they don't know what the salary cap really is going to be. The more data that I see based on how much the losses were last year, I mean, the true losses, if the NFL were to wrap in the true losses of last year into this salary cap this next season, where it should be to just get themselves to a base level point, it'd be $160 million. Everyone's salary cap in the NFL would be $160. Now, they're going to massage it out and move it over the course of a couple of years, but what happens when we're talking about next year, there's still being no fans. And the ticket revenue is still going down. There's new TV deals coming in. There's new gambling money coming in. So some of this is going to get offset, but it's a question mark in general. Nobody knows where this will really end up shaking out as far as the salary cap over the next couple of years. Not really. Y2K, how you doing, Y2? I don't think the Dunlap cut is a big deal. There will be plenty of people to sign. Next year might also be kind of a punted season. It could. I mean, this is where I go to your point, Y2K, where we've got to all be hesitant of drawing too many certainties off this deal of being, it means this, it means that, it means this. We'll have to see in retrospect as to what it really means in totality. It does mean something else. It means some other move is coming in conjunction with it. It isn't just, we needed to clear $14 million so we could just have some money to spend this offseason. I think they've got a plan for what they want to do with that money. And if it's a punted season, then it would make a lot more sense. If it's a season in which they're going to go for it, Y2K, and this is a year that they truly are still trying to compete for Super Bowls this season, I do get a little worried with it on that then, because where's the other pass rush coming from? Last year, there were a lot of pass rushers on the market, and you had $50 million to spend, and you ended up with Benson Mayowa and Bruce Irvin. They've shown me they can do that once. I'm not unconvinced that they couldn't just do it a second time, especially with a lot less assets this season and one more young player they're sitting on in Taylor that they're waiting to pop. Daniel Bemis. Hello, Daniel. Dunlap can be resigned if no one pays him. Seattle is trying to get him at a discount. Agreed, Daniel. I just don't know that some team out there is going to give him that discount that Seattle is expecting he's going to get. Yeah, I don't think anybody's giving out a lot of money deals out there, but Dunlap was pretty much the most impactful edge rusher over the back end of the season last year in football. I mean, his production over an 8-game span was fantastic. And again, not just as a pass rusher, but as a run stuffer as well. A highly graded out player, a really good player still at this point in his career, and he's a year younger than Watt. If Watt can get that kind of deal at his age with the supposed reputation surrounding him that he is a much worse player and not the same mold of what he was, then why can't Dunlap feel like he can get somewhere in the neighborhood? If not the same realm, but at least in the neighborhood. I guess I'd say, in the same realm, but not in the same neighborhood. I need to do that opposite. Chico, I feel like Pete Carroll is Prince Harry holding on to Russ. Can we get an Oprah-style interview? I would like to see it. I'd love to hear Pete Carroll's thoughts right now. This is the one time where Carroll's not been the most fascinating guy to watch in press conferences over recent years, just because he's just The media doesn't ask him very hard questions, and he doesn't get into very hard topics. But I will say this, it would be interesting to hear the media at this point kind of peppering him and going at him and stuff. And at some point or another, he's going to have to talk to some of the stories that have broken from this. And he'll probably say, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to talk about it. And see how he'll be like, okay, Pete, okay. We won't ask anymore then. But it would sure be nice to know as a fan. It'd be interesting to know. Maxwell Stern, have you taken a look at Jalen Tywin? Really good pass rusher. I have not as of yet, Maxwell, but I will. Jalen Tywin. I'll add Tywin. But I will add him to my list. I'll take a look at him. I'm a little bit going to the pass rushers almost last on this Maxwell because I try to target the positional groupings I think more that are most likely for Seattle to look at in the draft, and they've gone so defensive end heavy over recent drafts. I would be very surprised to see them pick anything in the first 5 rounds being a defensive end. I'd be you picked 2 last year, LJ Collier the previous season, Rasheem Green the year before that in the 3rd round. I just don't think they're going to go pass rusher. So that's why I'm going to try to concentrate a little bit more. I only have so much tape to watch, but I really want to concentrate in those spots where it's like, what's a feasible guy that they're really going to look at? Pat Bush, Dunlap will get paid by another team for sure. Y'all should have kept him. Pat, we are in agreement, man. That's the part I don't like about that. That's the part that kind of rubs me wrong is hopefully you can get equivalency in 2 players because there'll be so many discounts out there on the open market this offseason. But he's a real fantastic player and a guy people shouldn't sell short on, man. He came here and he looked like a whole new guy, not having to play in Cincinnati. And who wouldn't? Who wouldn't under those circumstances? Nathaniel, I hope we don't go bargain basement shopping with $14+ million in cap room. Nor do I. Chico, Philly just did take that dead money hit. They did. It's sort of the silliness, Chico, of those folks out there that they're sort of hitching all of their hope to the thought process that there's no way a team would ever take a $39 million dead money hit. There's no way that no team would ever take a $39 million dead money hit. No way, no way. Well, we're in the offseason, but there have been 2 records set for dead money hits taken, being the $22 million that the Rams took for Goff, and then the $33 million that the Philadelphia Eagles took for Wentz. How far away is $39 million from $33 million? Not far. Not far. I don't think that we're in an age anymore where we need to look at that as being this absolute ground no one would ever cross. I think that's not the question at hand. The question is not whether or not a team would be willing to do it. The question is whether the team that team is trading for will give them the applicable value, the associated value then to make it worth their while to take that dead money hit. That is the question. That's the pivot point to me. And the answer is maybe. We've never seen a Hall of Fame quarterback traded in his prime. So if there's ever the king's ransom that can come, this would be the time it would happen. Maxwell, what would your reaction be if you saw the headline Russell Wilson has been traded? Sadness. Sadness, mourning. Not like I'm sadness in the morning, like it's morning and I'm drinking coffee, but like mourning like MOURNING. It would truly be the end of an era of football in Seattle. It would be a tough day, even if it was the right thing, even if it was the thing to make Russell happy because he wasn't happy, if it was the thing to put us on a pathway to eventually getting back. I can wrap my head around all those things and I can come aboard all those things. But there would be a moment of time. There would be some time there that definitely it would hurt. It would hurt, man. These are never easy to watch these things happen. I pointed to it a few times in recent history as a Seattle fan, seeing these stars leave, especially when you're younger and you're a kid coming into just loving sports and then you're young and, kind of idolizing a certain guy. It's just brutal. It's brutal. It's probably part of the process. I haven't had enough patience for those folks that are so emotionally invested in Russell Wilson no matter what and who think that the bad guys in this whole situation are simply and only Carroll and Schneider in his personnel decision-making and Carroll in his immobility as a head coach. And they may be very true with that, but I think I've not had enough patience with them in the respect of understanding that emotionality and that love you sort of attach to that player when you're coming up on the scene and just learning to love a sport, and then this one player just looks amazing to you. So I get where they're coming from. I think I'd feel a lot like they feel like that on that point. It might take me a couple days to kind of breathe and get through it. I do a live stream. I'll probably be putting a 12-pack back or something, just deep in depression. Matthias 23451, how many top line guys will be available this offseason? Well, it's hard to say on the cut train of things, Matthias. That when I was looking through the potential guys to be cut on the open market for offensive linemen and other teams around the league, there's not a lot of overpriced guards out there due to be cut. Maybe a Brandon Brooks from the Philadelphia Eagles, but I think he's a right guard. I've long pointed to the fact that what we need right now is a left guard, not a guy that's a right guard that will move to left guard, or moving Damian Lewis from right guard to left guard, but we need actually a left guard. But there are centers out there, and there's, you could draft a tackle that could be a swing guy, an up-and-coming guy for you. So there's ways to address the line, Matthias. It's not quite as deep as maybe some other positional groupings out there, but there's some good guys. Center's deep, but it's that left guard position is the one that's just a little bit light right now as far as the offseason acquisitions and the players available. Good if he doesn't want to play in Seattle. Yep, if you don't want to play, I agree with you there, man. Seahawks reign. If somebody doesn't want to play, or hey, I get it. Go ahead, move on. Fat Daddy Stacks, thank you for the $5 donation, sir. Starting off the dono game, right? And I appreciate you for that. He says, just diving in and rolling back to the beginning, but catch up soon. But your interesting move by the Seahawks. Interesting move for sure, Fat Daddy Stacks. And when you go, what's coming next from this? What is the second factor of this? And I think people will be a little more encouraged too when they look and notice the amount of players I think that will begin to get cut. This is the week it's supposedly starting to happen. We're going to see more and more of it. It's not supposed to be just, Seattle did Dunlap and that's all we'll get to see. Teams are going to hold off as long as they can of having to make these decisions because these are tough decisions. You're releasing guys onto the market who aren't overpriced, who aren't productive players. There are those things. They're well priced. And they could be productive at the same time, but you are drawn up into the cap. You got no cap space to spend. You got no choice. You got to make the tough decision. You're not going to make that quick and fast. You're going to take as long as you can to make those kind of tough choices. But the cutting is happening. It is happening one way or another. Jose, still don't think you're right now. I love your optimism on it, Jose, and I hope you're right. I hope you're right on it. I do hope you're right. With me, Jose, it's been like a sliding scale where you start out the offseason, I would have said 5% chance Russ gets traded. And then it's this thing just slowly sliding up and gaining as the offseason's gone along here. I'm about 47% right now. I'm 47% he won't be traded. 47% he'll be traded. So 53% that he won't be traded. So I'm still landing on the thing I don't think he'll be traded. But my goodness, it's getting close. I'm DJ Dallas. Do you think Russ is staying? That's basically where my chances are at. I'm DJ Dallas. But again, this thing, you give me another couple of days of these reports, I get more details leaking out about, a rift wider than the Grand Canyon that exists between Coach Carroll and Russell Wilson. I'm going to start pushing that up about to a 60-40. He's going to be moved. It's a literal every day with the more information I take in on the situation, do I find myself moving more towards, oh my gosh, this really is going to probably happen this year. This is not now, like now. So I'm a little, I hope he stays, man, but it's not looking good, bro. It's not looking good. Not at all. Sean Harker, maybe this is the first of the moves to appease Russ. Allocate that money to the O-line. It could be. I mean, they can definitely, you're going to be able to get, I think Thuney's going to probably come in, I think about $12 million a year right now on average, but his first year cap hit will be down near probably in the realm of like $6 to $7 million. So you still have then half of that $14 million to go out there on the open market and get another guy at that point. So yeah, you could. And I think that Sean, no matter what, I think they're going to address, regardless of Russ, I think they're going to address somewhat of the offensive line. I don't think that they just thought once Mike Iupati retired, they would rely on Jordan Simmons and Phil Haynes to be the guys that are the heir apparent. I don't think that that's where they're looking at. Seahawks reign. Russ letting his ego get to him. Very, very well could be proven out on this, man. Very well proven out. I mean, I'll tell you, he ends up in Chicago. I have a hard time seeing the pathway to Super Bowls in Chicago for him. I do. I even a team like the Saints, I don't know how you get to it there either. The cap situation that they're in, they've been this $95 million essentially that, or wherever they're at right now, $70, $80 million over the cap that they find themselves. This has been a long time coming. This has been years in the making of them just slowly building out that dead money hit and pushing it a year further out and pushing it and converting another year of Drew Brees' salary to bonus to push it out a little further. So it's long been coming. The bill's long been due. It's going to arrive. And when it does, that team's is going to be brought down to the studs to a large degree. Now, maybe Russ will be there to build it all back up again. But I mean, how many years does he have to do that? And maybe he is so pleased by that. It's part of why I also think there's going to be some surprise teams that could enter this mix. I'm not buying it's got to be just those teams or that's it. I think there's some other teams that could still come into this and do something that was an initial foray of teams to kind of add out there and see if they could generate that spark of life from them. Boom Shakalaka says Schneider never does the franchise tag, though. He very rarely does. Usually only in a kicker, I think, historically has been the time he's done it. Way back in the day. UE2K says Dunlap will be missed, but given the financial state of the team, it's imperative that Seahawks get as much value in free agency as possible, and the bloodletting to come will flood the free agent market, and we need the money. Agreed. Just as long as they spend that money right, UE, right? So they had the $50 million last year to spend, and they didn't spend it right. So put them, and there were available pass rushers last year. So they've got to do the right thing with it. They will create the money, but now where are you going to put that money? Because we knew Carlos Dunlap, I knew $14 million, you could probably efficiently move that money in other places more efficiently. But there's also the carrying risk there that you find yourself right back again in that boat of we can't generate any pass rush, and our defense then just collapses. The GOAT 209 says, is Sherman a top 10 all-time corner? No. I think as well, maybe I'm being a little bit in parsing it too much. I think when you take the top 10 all-time corners, you almost have to do 2 top 10 all-time lists. You've got to do the top 10 all-time list of the zone guys and top 10 all-time list of the man-on-man guys. Because Sherman was such a zone corner throughout his career, whereas there's other guys that are just the sticky guys in coverage, and each are kind of different skill sets in what they ask the player to do. But no, there's been a lot of really good corners in this league that are ahead of him. Certainly the Deion Sanders, Night Train Lane. Hell, you could make the argument. I think the Steelers, Dom Capers. I think wasn't he a great defensive back in his day? There's been a few that have come through. I think you got to put up a little bit higher. Champ Bailey, Darryl Green. I don't think so. Probably top 20 though. Maybe top 20. I have to think about that. Seahawks Jose says, doubt we made that deal with Dunlap. Maybe not. There was an agreement where he did agree to restructure at that time to facilitate the trade. So there could have been a chance that they put some kind of extra agreement in place with it. But I don't know. This is what I'm hearing out there on the online sphere. Randall, any other offseason, I think the sky was falling with the Dunlap move. I've decided to wait and see what happens. Might get Dunlap and Vaughn for $14 million. Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham could get cut. We don't know. And this is an offseason as any that is as hard to predict as any offseason could be with this. Normally, it's already going to be kind of tough to know exactly what direction the team's looking to go. It's almost near impossible with all the things coming involved. All the players who could be available, the less amount of money available. It's kind of a bouncing game all over the place. So I'm like you. I will remain patient for now. A little worried, but I'm not freaking out. I'm not going to do what y'all think I'm going to do, which is freak out. Boom Shakalaka, rest for the Hawks wants all the money and superstars and pimp O-line with no cap. That's right, baby. Pay me and set me up to look good. That's on me. If we trade Russ to the Bears, hopefully that package includes Mac. I've got to think that's on me. It would. I've got to think that it would indeed. You look at the players that they have available out there. There's not a lot that super interests you. Cole Kmet as a tight end would maybe be the guy you look at. Whitehair, a guard center type you could take a look at. He'd be an interesting guy in a package. But Mac would be a guy that you'd have to think as far as Carroll when he's talking to Schneider, make sure you get me Mac in that deal. I want 3 years of cheap club control for Mac in this package as well. So I could see them doing it. I could see them doing it for sure with this. It would make a lot of sense in that respect. I'm going that route with it. 3 first-round picks, Mac, maybe a little bit extra. It sounds about in the realm of what the cost would be. Seahawks Rain Russ needs to improve some of his decision-making on and off the field. Well, maybe off the field, I can't speak 100% on that, but there's certainly stuff on the field that needs to improve. And I think the new offensive coordinators could help him a long way to going there with that. If he does decide to want to come back, I think that's going to help being with more of a modernized offense. That'll go a long way with Russ to getting him along the path, I think. The GOAT 209, thoughts on the Seahawks tagging? Nobody. Not a fan of the tag, GOAT. You're paying a lot of cost for the now. You're not getting any savings at that point. It's one of those ones you really want to use with hesitancy. On top of the fact it usually creates a situation with players where they're not always the happiest at that point. A guy like Carson, who already knows that his shelf life as a running back is very low, he's not going to get a lot of opportunities at the bite of that apple. The one true bite he now gets, the team comes in after he's a 6th, 7th round pick, and they're going to now put him on a franchise tag. It lowers down his full potential of what he could earn over the course of his career. And especially look at running back position, you got to feel for those guys a little bit in that they don't really get paid and their bodies fall apart at a really young age. It just sucks for them. So I think that they're doing right by the player. Seattle's a very pro-player organization in a lot of different ways. And they're very subtle ways. So the Dunlap release is a subtle way to show itself. Rather than waiting on Dunlap until there's been more of a market flood and then release him out there, you're releasing him now so he can get out ahead of the pack and start potentially negotiating with other teams. That's doing right by a player and keeping the reputation of your organization league wide among other players relatively high because of that. You're not going to be as cutthroat or down and dirty as you hear about some organizations being with that. 283-128, Pete and Russ need to sit down and chew some gum and get over it. I agree, man. Just one pack of Bubblicious could solve all of this, right? That's something I've maintained for a while here is that you hear rumors that they haven't talked in weeks. And you go, why not? You guys have been together for 10 years. Why is there this chilly feeling? I found a little bit about this when I heard a recent story about Belichick and Brady, where over the years they never went out for dinner together. You never just, and I just always thought that's where you get this close relationship with someone where you're intricately linked for decades and so much of your success is reliant on the clear communication, understand, and that there's almost this iciness that exists there. Odd to see. But I agree with you. The best point for resolution for both of these two parties is to get them both in the room, not on a phone, but in a room, and just hash this out. Get to a true resolution point. Not to where one side's saying, here's how it's going to be, sucker, and you're going to do it. But with both of them going, how do we find a way to make this to where we're meeting halfway here? We're finding a compromise state here to make this work. That's the adult way that you'd hope this is. Ahmad, how you doing, Ahmad? Good to see you. Hey, John Robinson. How you doing, John? I am doing great myself, my guy. Doing good. Bird of Prey. Wilson leaving Seattle this offseason now is highly probable. Russ has legitimate grievances, but coming out in public about it has definitely burned his bridge with Pete and the Seahawks. There certainly seems to be a way, and that was received Bird of Prey when he did that the front office, we heard immediately right after it that they did not take a kind liking to that. This is not a place that they necessarily, I think, would like either. I mean, he's not just going after Pete at this point. You're going after a little bit of Schneider. They weren't that these were horrific comments or something. I don't want to overblow what Russell said because I know there's a lot of folks get sensitive about this saying, he didn't really say that much. I mean, what did he really say? But he said enough for a guy that chooses his words so carefully as he does. He said enough to know where the fires were that he was going to be lightened with this. And I think when you talk about, again, the first rule of this team as far as Coach Carroll is concerned is protect the team. Going public, going into the media, airing the grievances of the team publicly is a breaking of that rule. Whether you think it's justified or not, or that Russell Wilson has a right to be out in public and saying these things, it is breaking a rule fundamentally set by the head coach for right or wrong, and is going to cause a reaction thusly. And how that coach then receives that, who created that rule, because that coach still remains in power. So I do think that there's a little bit of that where you're causing that schism by being willing to do that. Maybe you get the change as well. Maybe you push that forward too. But, I don't know. I think it didn't land quite as well as I think that they maybe had hoped it would land. Jose, I would want that info. Seahawks Rain, which info are you thinking on that, Jose? For that Seattle had that Seattle, with the deal on Dunlap, had said that they would release him if they couldn't come up with a contract extension. Just something I heard. I didn't hear anything certain from the media on it, but just some stuff I heard in the background on it, reading up on it this week. Seahawks reign, and Russ took it to the media like a diva instead of handling business behind closed doors. Yeah, the media thing, the second media it's a place you go to with this where you're taking it kind of to a different level. And maybe we'll find out in retrospect the truth on this. And maybe in retrospect, we'll come to find out that Russell for years has been voicing these complaints and concerns, and that it's been unheard. I thought Brandon Marshall had a very interesting story of his time in Seattle recently in this last week. And he talked about a situation where they were practicing the fade route down near the end zone in training camp. And Russ and Brandon wanted to run the fade route a certain way. And they could be effective with it doing it that way. And Coach Carroll was wanting them to run it, according to Brandon Marshall, the Jimmy Graham way. Jimmy Graham, who had just been there previously, and they'd gotten really good at those fade routes to Jimmy down there in the end zone. And there was a sort of a debate back and forth that went back and forth between Russell Wilson and Carroll in this moment, according to Marshall, where they're going back and forth, and Russell's making his case, and Carroll's listening, and Russell's making his case, and Carroll's listening and chewing his gum. And then after, according to Marshall, like 20 minutes of talking, Coach Carroll says, that's great. I hear everything you're saying. Do it the Jimmy Graham way. And you hear a story like that, which Marshall's giving on purpose, I think, to give an indication of this is what maybe Russ was dealing with throughout his time, where he's trying to have this input, desperately trying to push in and have a voice here, and the voice is going unheard. Whether that's the truth or not, I don't know. It's an interesting story. It's an interesting little peek behind the curtain, I would think. Yeah, again, just back to the original point. Behind closed doors is the best way to do this. But again, if he's been trying to squawk through on the closed doors and it's gotten him nowhere, maybe I understand a little bit more why this is the route he's going instead. Because at the end of the day, what he would have been doing at that point at the beginning of this offseason was not pushing for change, but pushing then to say, I just want out. I've tried to say what I could say. I tried to talk to you for 10 years to get you to wrap your head around this. You ain't wrapping your head around this. I'm done. And if it's that, then it makes a lot of sense why Russ did it. He knew it was going to take a hit to his rep, but he knew that the best hope for him, any hope for him to get where he wants to get with his career is to move on to a different team. Makes sense at that point too. Juno White, stacked defensive end class in free agency, so releasing Dunlap seems reasonable. He won't get more than 13-year average. Maybe not, Juno. Maybe not on that one. I mean, that's it. That's going to be the question at hand is Willie, because you're right, it is stacked. I mean, this is the best defensive end free agent class as we stand right now before the cutting has happened in recent years. So you're talking one that's going to be by a wide margin the amount of players available that you can go out there and pick from, and the so few teams out there that'll actually have some money to really spend. Say nothing of the fact that those teams out there that'll have money to spend, that might not be positional fits or scheme fits for those players. So maybe so. I still just don't think Juno he is going to come back. I think once you release him, he's probably gone, unfortunately. Boom Shakalaka says every badass O-line you guys say are not going to happen. No Thuney, no Green Bay center, only no name. Well, that's the route they do tend to go in. I'll give you that. That is the route they go in. I like Turtles. How you doing? I like Turtles. I have a feeling the Bears are really trying to dank a deal with Seattle behind the scenes on Russ. The Bears do feel quietly like the team in the background that is making the hardest push. That there seems to be the indicators that they wanted to give out there publicly were that this is our biggest priority and we're going to enter this fray and we're going to try really hard. They've got to come with a pretty nasty offer. I mean, it's got to be crazy because when you're talking about 3 first-round picks, it's because they're going to be late first-round picks. They're like high second-round picks at that point, including this year, which is a 20th overall. We've been picking in the 20s. We know the type of players that are available there. So the Bears are going to have to factor that in and then build the package past what would be what you just normally have if we're talking about trading a quarterback where there's minimal amount of dead money hit by the team trading him versus $39 million. So that means extra second-round picks. That means Von Mack and another player. It means an insane package, but one that is valid for Seattle to ask for because no team in NFL history has taken a $39 million hit. I'm going to take that hit. You got to pay for it, team I'm trading him to. Thomas Cox, have you looked at Landon Dickinson and Deontay Brown from Alabama? Yes, I have. Let me grab my trusty scouting book here. So let's look up. I love Landon Dickinson. He was actually the first guy that I had. Not the first. He was one of the guys I had drafted in my sort of mock off-season look, where I wanted Seattle to go. I've lost my deal on him. That's fine. And of course, I've got my stuff all out of line right now. But Dickinson's everything you could want in a center. He's a leader. Players rallied around the guy. He's an Alabama lineman, so you know he's going to be a freakish guy. He's a big center, not just big in that he's a tall guy, but big long arms, big frame. He's a guy that you could put up against a one-tech, one-on-one up there, and he's going to be able to hold up in pass protection. Very good in the run game, come downhill, and he'll drive guys off the ball, knows how to combo block in the zone game. Alabama does a lot of the zone principles. They don't do some of the same stuff Seattle's going to do this year exactly, but just base zone principles in general, he can do. There's not a lot not to like about his game. I would maintain if he hadn't have torn his ACL last year, he would be probably a top 32 pick in this draft. A little bit like Cesar Ruiz last year, even though this guy's a little more, not as much of the technician, a little bit more of a built guy. But that in him just being a very safe center prospect who should be a starter in this league for years to come, / maybe even has some star potential there if he can really put it all together. But he's a leader, which is what you need at that center position, a heady guy, a smart guy to go with the physical attributes that he has, which allows him to be really into that kind of, freakish territory for a center where I think he's going to be picked in the second round. Seattle targeted him there. If they liked him there and they were able to, they should be able to grab him right around where they're selecting because the ACL injury will drop him down. I'd be all in favor of it. I think he can do all the movement-based stuff, get to the second level. You could even have him maybe do some pulling. I think he moves good in that respect, despite being as big as he is. He's not a freakish guy or anything like that. There's not anything that just absolutely is just amazing about him, but just everything is above average to really good about his skill set. So really like him in that respect. Deontay Brown, I got it in my notes. I'm remembering him here. He's a very large human being. Another guy, you stack him next to Dickinson with that Alabama line. Sometimes you've got this. It's a wall of human. It's a huge wall of human, and I don't know how guys can get around. It's understandable why they're so dominant, just on how big these guys are. And you got Leatherwood over at left tackle next to him. It's like, my goodness. But he does move well in space. Deontay Brown, despite being as big, again, another guy gets to the second level despite his size. Usually these big guys in college, when they're this size, when they're just the legit 6'4", 6'5", they're just big. Carrying a lot of weight with it. They're not going to be able to move like these guys can to get down to the second level. I think he could maybe do some of the stuff in Seattle's scheme, but I'm not completely convinced, especially when we're talking left guard. Because again, he moves well, but he is a little slow-footed, if that makes any sense. He'll get there and he'll arrive at the place, but it's just it is a little lumbering to get there. And with the new offensive line and these linemen in it, they're going to look, I think, a little bit more motion-based. Deontay Brown last year, the year before that, would have been exactly the type of lineman Seattle would have looked to target, being the big rotogrator type guy. But now I think they're going to more factor in a little bit more of the mobility side of things. The thing that gets me with him a little bit is that he whiffs a little bit too much for me. There's too many snaps where off the ball, and this is not just on pulling or getting to the second level where he's trying to target a linebacker. He'll just completely whiff on a defensive lineman in front of him, and they'll go right past him. It happened too much for a guy his size. He should be able to get his body at the very least in front of a guy, not necessarily win the rep, but at least get a little bit more of a neutralization there on the pass rush rather than just the free rusher getting to his quarterback. I think when I looked at it with Deontay Brown, even though he did play a little bit in the zone scheme with Alabama, where I fell back around to was thinking that his best positional fit's going to be in a man-on-man blocking scheme. Most NFL offensive schemes kind of do both anyway. They implement kind of both items into it, so you're going to do a little bit both, like Alabama does. But I think he's going to be built for a better offense that's really just mainly man-on-man with a little bits of zone element. Because he'll be at his best when you put him in front of a guy and just let him use his size to get up in front of guys, let him use his strength to kind of blow guys off the ball. Combo blocking, getting him moving into space too much, I don't think that's going to be a fit. And that's where I land with him, where I just don't think he'd be that great for us with Waldron's scheme coming into play. But Dickinson, yes. Dickinson's a 2 thumbs up on that one. Seahawks reign. If Trubisky's our quarterback next year, I'm not watching. I don't think he will be. I hope not. Dear God, no. No. Huey says, 2 cases, I'd cut Reed as well. There are going to be a glut of free agents, many of which will have to settle for less than they were expecting. Yeah, if you're going to go this route, Huey, right? If you're going to decide that what you want to do here is go for the unknown and trust in the unknown being better cumulatively, then why not go all in? So if you're going to cut Dunlap, then go all in and cut Reed too. Because you should be able to, if you're at $8.6 million, you should be able to get a better player than Jaron Reed, theoretically, this offseason with this grouping that's going to be out there. Fat Daddy Stacks, wonder if the Seahawks are trying to help Russell Wilson. See a trend in the salary cap, such as have to give up something to get something. Or trying to help Russell see a trend in the salary cap, such as having to give up something to get something. Yeah, I mean, from the standpoint, Fat Daddy Stacks, if this move opens up to go sign Thuney day one of free agency, if that's, then it makes a lot of sense. And you need to clear that space up to go make that corresponding move. That was going to need to happen. The other interesting thing that we've got to pay attention to, of course, here is Seattle has the ability to convert Russell's base salary this year into bonus, and they have yet to do that. If Seattle was going to hold on to Russell Wilson and keep him for this next year, I think that they would convert that money into bonus money this year to create that cap space. If they don't, I think it is a little bit of a small indicator that, again, maybe that we are looking more of a trade to potentially happen here. Von Miller is a free agent. See, Jose? Yep. Von Miller's a free agent. Free agent. I've got a couple donos here. Bear with me. I'm just getting through the chat. I'll get your donations. Thank you so much. Nathaniel, the Cowboys couldn't win with Dak making close to nothing. They still won't win with him making $49 million per year. Yeah, the Cowboys backed themselves into that corner, right, Nathaniel? Because they had, like we had with Russell, those mid-round picks, you get past the third year with mid-round picks that aren't the first-rounders. They got year 4 and 5 on them. But after the third year, you pay them, like we'll have to do with DK Metcalf. So year 3 passes. He's due to be paid. He's paid well above his contract. He's a franchise quarterback. He's showing you everything you need to see. It sucks to have to pay that amount of money. It's hard. You go, gosh, but he's Dak. He's not this. He's not that. I mean, man, we want to pay this amount for this, what we're getting. But unfortunately, that's the lay of the land. That's what you get yourself caught in. And then they wait now 1 year, 2 year. And then now the bill finally comes due and now you're overpaying. And the Cowboys aren't going nowhere with that salary. And the NFC East in general right now is just a complete, you talk about the NFC West being tough. The NFC East is our, just that whole division is like, what are you guys doing here? Gina White, mind sharing how you rank this year's edge class from the tape you've seen? I think Ojulari, I can't pronounce him, Aziz Ojulari from Georgia is overrated, while really liking all 3 Miami guys at appropriate value, of course. I think that's the key on your second point there, Juno. That's the key with the Miami guys is appropriate value. The first guy. So the first guy being who will probably, I think, be maybe taken off the board, but I'm not completely sure, is Jalen Phillips. I think he goes before Rousseau because Rousseau opted out last year. And so you have a lot of rough tape to go off of with Rousseau, and he seems to actually be kind of falling down boards a little bit. He's intriguing, long as hell. He'd be a great little, I think, Leo in for us potentially here. But I don't think he's going to last that long. Phillips is a guy that the tape didn't blow me away with him. I thought he was a guy that, try hard, hard hat, high energy, high motor, smart player. There's a lot to like about his game in that he's very technically sound, can use his hands, understands just generally how to play the game. He's a football player kind of guy. But there's no wow factor to him for being picked in the top 15. That's the part that throws me off with him a little bit. The thing I like about Ojulari, I'm not going to say his name right, and I'm not going to get it right, so I'm just wanting to try. I like him a little bit like with Tyron from the University of Washington. They have that twitchy get off that I'm going to always tend to favor just a little bit, and I'm going to like that a little bit. So that's where something you can kind of build off of. Both of them have the secondary skills they got to develop. Like once an offensive lineman gets you with the initial grip, how do you get off of it? Because you are a little bit lighter. What kind of hand fighting can you do to get those hands released? But he's got a fantastic counter inside move in what he does as well. So he really understands how to use that outside move Ojulari does. You just press those tackles to the edge. And the second he gets them oversetting, he's got a great counter step to the inside where he really crosses their face, and then they have no chance and he gets right to the quarterback. I think those kind of skills are the things that can translate into the next level. I'll say that I'm not super impressed by this class of... Oh, you think Ojulari is overrated? I said underrated. I'm not blown away about Ojulari. Again, him being picked in the second round, I like that. Him being picked in the top 32, not there. And Tyron's kind of the same way, right? Man, top 32s, look, I got to squeeze hard on that one to go there. And so I guess we are on the same page then as far as Jalen Phillips go. I think he's overrated. You're going to pick him in the top 15. It's too high to pick a guy like that doesn't have enough of a wow skill set there for you. So I think, Juno, in general, the edge rush class is as weak as I've seen in recent years. I'm very underwhelmed right now by the edge class. It's a good class for cornerbacks. It's a good class, pretty good class for running backs, great class for tackles, pretty good class for guards and centers, great class for wide receivers. But I think the safety class is a little weak. I think linebacker a little weak. Defensive ends are a little weak. So at first look, I've got to go more thoroughly through the defense, but I'm just, the edge class is just not there for me, Juno. I've yet to see a guy really, I mean, Kwity Paye is probably the most exciting guy I've seen so far. I like him a lot, but he's been really one of the only true, real wower guys for me. Dennis says, there is something about the silence from the Seahawks and Russell Wilson that makes me feel like it's going to happen either this offseason or next offseason. I'm certainly on board now with saying it's 100% certain that if he's not moved this season, it's the next offseason, and Seattle's only able to placate the situation by just letting Russ know and getting to him and say, look, bud, it's $39 million. We can't take that hit. Yeah, we want to accommodate you here, but no one's going to give us the draft capital to give us the capital of what you're worth plus the $39 million. Wait a year, the cap hit goes down to $26 million. We can make that work. We'll get you right on a fast train out of the city the second that happens. But I think it's absolutely certain at this point next season he's gone at this point. I mean, it really is. For the reasons you said, silence can be deafening. Silence can speak volumes. Silence is not always, well, we don't know what's happening because nobody's telling us what's happening. This is a moment where the silence coming from the organization, from Coach Carroll, from Russell Wilson after he put those there, Russell Wilson could be coming back at any point in time saying, hey, I just want to make sure I clarify here off these recent media discussions we've had, because I put some comments out there that I think have gotten a little misconstrued. I want to remain in Seattle for the rest of my career, bar none. I don't want to go anywhere. I don't want to be traded. This team drafted me. This team trusted me. I've won Super Bowl here. I've been to Super Bowls. This is where I want to finish my career. End of story. But we hear none of this from either party. To your point, Dennis, and I think it speaks volumes. I think he's at 42 per year is Dak's new press comp. Nathan, 42 million per year is Dak's new contract, I think. Seahawks reign, NFL is rigged. How is Brady still winning a Super Bowl? I think Brady has proven himself to be a pretty freakish talent at this point, and I don't know if I can. I don't fall in line with saying I think the NFL is rigged. I can't quite get there with it. But he had an opportunity last year to pick the exact perfect team for him. You look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I think people didn't really realize it as much at the time and really understand it. He wasn't going to some miserable team that had no talent. It was one of the most talent-laden teams in the NFL that was with young talent ready to really fully pop and come into their own. And they were missing this one element that they desperately needed, being a sure quarterback, a guy that, not even a guy that's going to give you an MVP level of play, but just a guy who can come in there and not mess things up. Jameis Winston threw for, 32 touchdowns the previous year, but threw like 36 interceptions or something. So you just needed to get those things removed out of that offense, which is what Brady basically was able to single-handedly do. And that alone brought their top end back up to where we saw it. They've done a great job drafting there over the last few years. And especially doing a great job of drafting by not picking for need, but picking based on best player available. You know, when they picked Vita Vea, I think in the top 10, a lot of other arguments you could be making to other positions that they kind of more needed at that time. But they knew what they were doing. They had a plan, and they locked it in. 283 says, I would definitely try and trade him before we cut him, since we only have a few draft picks. Yeah, I don't know if you're going to get anything for Jarran Reed with the $8.6 million. But yeah, I would think you would probably maybe try to do something like that if you could. Don't think you'll get a lot for him in a trade, though, with that salary. Bird Price says this upcoming season for the Seahawks is going to be very, very interesting. Buckle up. Buckle up indeed. It's going to be a bumpy one. Cole Mills, Brady wins the Super Bowl because he takes a discount. That's also another reason he does. Solid point, Cole. Solid point. Washi, when are you going to do a call-in? Just DM me when you want me to join, but it's getting late in Seattle. I don't know if we're going to do one today, Washi. I want to do kind of just a short, quick show today because we're going to try to maybe get back on the horn here on Thursday, hopefully with some more news. But I will let you know if I do. Seahawks Ray and Brady is cloned. He's actually 25 in his clone age. I could see it. I can see it. Modern science, man. They made Dolly 40 years ago, man. They died Molly 40 years ago. What does that say about what's going on now, man? Dolly the lamb, man. JJ Epperly, what do you think of Trill Williams? Trill Williams. JJ, I did look him up. Let me get my notes. William Trill, 6'2" cornerback out of Syracuse. Here's the thing I like about this cat right off the gate. Same thing I like about the South Carolina boys. J.C. Horn, Makamura, is in college football, it becomes so hard over the last couple of years as I scout these cornerbacks to be able to assess cornerback play. Not just because of the fact that when you get the film, when you're not getting the all 22 copy, you can't often see the cornerbacks. They'll leave frames, so it's harder to judge their back pedal and how they're reacting in zone and whatnot. But then you factor into it as well as if you have a really good cornerback, quarterbacks just don't throw at them. They'll just ignore him the whole entire football game. You'll literally be sitting there watching film, just watching half a back pedal all game of a single guy. And it gets hard sometimes. The film can really stack up with that. With William Trill, what you like is that like those South Carolina guys, they've got a guy on either side that's legitimate. So there's not just a weakness that the quarterback can go out there and target on the other side. Syracuse has got Melifonwu as the other cornerback, who's a guy I got to go out there and scout as well at this point. He's got a little more holes in his game than I think Trill Williams does. But it did mean that Trill Williams was then going to be tested at certain points in time. He wasn't just going to be out there on that island, not, kind of doing anything. So he's another big corner, played in zone. I've said it to you guys before over and over again. This draft is absolutely loaded to the hilt with big 6 foot plus, 32, 33-inch long-armed zone corners, or i.e. exactly what our Seattle Seahawks front office looks for in the model of cornerback that they prefer. So this bodes well for a team that needs cornerback help. It means a deep class of this. It's going to push guys down who probably shouldn't be pushed down. A placebo, Paulson, Acebo, for instance, could get pushed into the 5th or 6th round at that point. A guy who might have in previous years been more into that 3rd roundish, late 2nd roundish type territory. He's an excellent tackler. Probably one of the best cornerback tacklers in this draft, I think. He's right up there with it. I mean, this guy, when he gets his hands on you, you're going down. And not just when the play comes to him as well. He's very good at attacking on the back end of the play. Player will be running away from him, and he'll chase it down on the backside. He's a guy that, again, this is a very important feature in that we're talking about a zone corner in Seattle scheme. They need their corners to tackle in this scheme as well and be able to do these attributes that he does. He played a little bit of slot corner. I'm guessing that was just to take advantage of his run stuffing ability so they get him kind of closer into the line of scrimmage. There's a little bit of his game that you like in the respect of he can do a lot of different things. You could do a little bit of safety play. You could put him in a little bit of slot. He could play out on the outside. And again, because he's scheme specific and he fits this scheme, I think he would do well with that. He's a little stiff in his hips, which isn't unusual when you get a guy about 6'2" or so. But I do wonder if he's really going to be able to, at the stem of the route, change directions like you need to change to make as many plays on that ball. I think there's going to be some easy completions given up in front of him, a little bit of that Shaq Griffin stuff that we see at times. But he should be able to protect over the top. He's got just enough speed to do so, and he's got the length to do so, and he understands the scheme in order to do so. I do see him somewhere between the 4th to 6th round, probably right about in that 5th round place or so, because there's just a couple things to his game where he's got to clean up a little bit on the footwork. Got the question marks as far as can he flip his hips? That's always the question with those bigger cornerbacks. But there's guys like Caleb Farley, who's a big cornerback in this draft. He can completely flip his hips and move wherever he wants to move. And this guy just takes him that little hitch in his giddy up to a degree. But still a good prospect. I'd be perfectly happy and satisfied, get him in the 5th round, and I would applaud the choice if it was made there. Maybe not quite 4th round, JJ, but 5th round, I'd be okay with it there. UE2K, Seahawks have to build a great offensive line before they can ask for a quarterback discount. Why? Why is that, Uwe? Seahawks Rain, there's no way a 47-year-old quarterback should be winning a Super Bowl. You're right. It certainly defies explanation in that respect. I like Turtles. Don't think Wilson's wife will let him take a pay cut. So that being said, don't see how we can make a decent roster with such a small cap hit. It says, as I spoke on earlier, it says the ongoing debate. I like Turtles that exists amongst the fan base right now. And I tried to kind of flesh that out a little bit. It is kind of what it is with that, where you got one side saying, you know you can do it, like Huey's saying there, give them the offensive line and you can do it. And there's others of us that say we just don't think it can. I don't think either side's going to be moved to the other side of the fence on that at this point. I think we're all pretty firmly in our own individual camps as far as how we see that. Randall says, thoughts on Wayne Gallman, Giants running back, unrestricted free agent, 26 years old. He had a decent year, nearly 700 yards, 4.8 yards per carry. He tore us up. For some reason, he reminds me of Le'Veon Bell, patient runner, not as good as a linebacker. Not as good as LB. Oh, as Le'Veon Bell. Sorry, I got that. I like Wayne. He's good. He certainly has the size prerequisite that Carroll's going to look for in his running backs. He doesn't run as hard necessarily for his size. He is a little bit more of the cutting running back. He wants to use his vision, find the hole type guy. With that said, he was really productive last year. I don't know what he's going to cost exactly, so it's a little bit of cost, Randall, for me. If we're talking about just a $2 million deal or something, then sure. If we're talking about $4 million, I'm probably not willing to give him that necessarily. I think he would fit, again, more in a scheme. Le'Veon Bell fit in a really great scheme throughout his career. That man-on-man blocking scheme I'm talking about with the players talking about who fit, Deontay Brown from Alabama, who'd fit best in a man-on-man scheme. That's a little bit of a kind of player in Gallman who I think would be best in a man-on-man scheme as far as a running back goes, that he's not really a zone runner. You want to get him with a guy who's got offensive alignment, the hat on hat, and he can find the open space and run to it. As opposed to with the zone, you pre-diagram, you predispose those running backs to going in a direction you want them to go, and you don't give them as much freelance ability to sort of, cut back against the grain usually. Could change this year with some of the scheme coming with Waldron, though, too. Doomtron, what happened? We cut Carlos Dunlap, Doom, yesterday, unfortunately. The GOAT 209, is Dwight Freeney a Hall of Famer? Yeah, I think he's a Hall of Famer. I do. I got to look at his sacks, but I think he's got something like 160, 170 sacks in his career. That's going to get it done. It's going to get it done. Nathaniel, though, if Russ has been growing disgruntled with the front office over the past several years, why did he resign with Seattle in 2019? It's a great question, Nathaniel. It's one that I've wondered as well. He picked an odd time this offseason to decide this was the offseason of his malcontent. I would have thought that around the time of the last contract, he would have figured out, Carroll's not buying into what I want. This isn't going where I want to go. I've had enough of this. I've tried to make this work. He's not going to build the offense around me. He's trying to bring the Schottenheimer guy in. I think he would have pulled the ripcord at that time. The timing of it now and it going down now is very strange. Thomas Cox, would they extend Jamal Adams? Yeah, I am expecting a contract extension for Jamal Adams this offseason. Again, another player I know is very divisive among the fan base, but one Thomas who I think that the Seattle Seahawks front office and Carroll are going to recognize in his value. They're going to be able to sign him to extension and lower his cap hit from where it is right now, because it sits at right now about $10 million. I think you could sign him to an extension and lower that thing down to $6 or $7 million on the first year hit. So getting him to an extension, lowering him down that hit. A lot of people worry about him making 18, trying to ask for $20 million. He ain't getting past 16. 16 is what he's making, which is not that. I think you can fit that in. John Robinson, if the Seahawks were to tag and trade Shaq Griffin, how much money would they be on the hook for, and what compensation would they receive? I don't know that there's a team out there that's going to want to pay Shaq Griffin on a 1-year, $16, $17 million deal that they would cost them to bring him in on a franchise tag. And from Shaq's standpoint, he has that as leverage to where he doesn't have to sign a contract extension if he knows he's going to get the $17 million and then go back onto the free agent market the next year. So there's no real push from Shaq's standpoint to have to sign a new deal at that point. So you're really not going to be able to get anything for him in a trade from another team for that. And it doesn't make sense for Seattle to have that money on the books while they're waiting to make that kind of trade. He just doesn't have that kind of value out in the league. Keep in mind with Shaq, he can't play in a man-on-man scheme. He can only play in his own scheme. So that slices out about nearly, 60% of the teams off the top that he could potentially even go to. So it's like your trade partners go down. There's just, it's too many things that make it not work, unfortunately, which is why he wasn't franchised. Seahawks reign. Russ is declining. He's less mobile, surprisingly. His decision-making has gotten worse, and he's throwing more costly INTs. I think definitely, or at least over the course of the last 8 games of the season, it was becoming that way for sure. The declining mobility's been there, but his decision-making had been better going into about the last half of the season last year. He had actually been improving over recent years and getting a little bit better about that aspect of his game, though it had been a little bit of a detriment for him through his early part of his career. But he did backtrack. He did regress a little bit as we got to the back half of the schedule. Brandon McKinney, Bucs defense is stacked. If a broken arm 39-year-old Peyton could win the Super Bowl this year, 18, then Brady can win 2 to 3 more with Tampa. Yeah, Tampa Bay is not going anywhere. I mean, they've got a great roster. They just franchised Godwin, who everyone thought they were going to lose for sure. They signed Levante David to a new contract. He's remaining there. Maybe they bring back Ndamukong Suh when this is all said and done. Supposedly now Brady wants to get Odell Beckham over there. He'll be the Antonio Brown for them of this season. While they still have Mike Evans, still have Godwin, still have that little slot receiver there as well. They're well positioned. They're well positioned at this point. Not to mention Brady's going to at this point sign another contract extension where he's going to once again give them, as he's done throughout his career, UE2K. Tom Brady is again this offseason going to give them cap relief in order for them to be able to keep these guys resigned and be able to make more moves out on the market. Nathaniel, am I the only one who noticed that when the offense fell off a cliff, the D stepped up? Could that just be because we can't not play in a game without causing fan heart attacks, or another reason? Well, the thing that happened mid-season, and they certainly let Russ throw from an attempt standpoint as much as they somewhat let him throw in the early part of the year, but they were more controlled throws. They were throws that were meant to mitigate the risk of interception and turnover, the risk of holding onto the ball for too long in the pocket. Then they also, I thought, ran the ball a little bit more consistently through that back half of that. So running the ball, shortening the games, Russell not having the interceptions, but also not running getting the team up and down the football field super fast so the defense is back out on the field instantaneously and gets worn down. I think that these were all kind of factors in. But I think that they can, if they're put together right and you get both sides of the ball clicking at the same time, Nathaniel, I think that they're fully capable of being a team that can get up on teams and stay up on teams and have comfortable victories. Randall McDaniel, there's a really good interview with Louis Riddick on the Athletic podcast. Gave really good insight on how front offices prepare for free agency and draft. Some cool stories. It's worth a listen. I saw he was on PFF here recently. I will go look that up, though, Randall. I've been diving into some of this stuff now, really getting deep into it. I'd love to listen. Great suggestion, man. I'll take a look at it, though. I'd love to hear that. UE2K says Pitts is the best player in this draft. He's a pure game changer. I agree. He's right. He's right in there, man. If you're taking away positional value of and what the quarterbacks are weighted towards because of how important a position it is on the football field, and just saying on how just pure great player itself. Penei Sewell and Pitts are probably right there. And Pitts, you might be right. Pitts might even have him. John Robinson says, when are teams going to start releasing marquee players? Saints still over $100 million over the cap. I was looking up this before the live stream because I anticipated this question was going to come down. Based upon what I'm reading, you've got to basically until the June 1st period to get fully below. So teams have a little bit of time. That said, we're supposed to be, that's why I think this is going to continue throughout, John, where the cutting is going to happen over months period rather than just it being a 1 week bloodbath that goes on. But I do think that this week was targeted for whatever reason as being the week where teams need to prepare for free agency. So you're going to see an initial first wave of cuts come through right now because of that. Because we're a week away from free agency or something like that. So I would expect I would expect that to occur here probably before the week's over. You'll see a lot more names that are going to be added to Dunlap out there. Fat Daddy Stacks, do the Hawks love Russell Wilson enough that they strip the team to give him an awesome line to teach him or to reduce his value if he fails to produce a winning season? I don't think they do, but not because necessarily Carroll doesn't love Russ, but because Carroll believes so stringently in his own process and philosophy developed over 40, 50 years of coaching. A guy at 70 years old is going to want to stick to what he's done, and the guy's been very successful at 70 years old is going to want to stick to what got him there. He's not going to want to suddenly change at 70 years old and do something completely different than how he's leaned on for the last 40 or 50 years, Hall of Fame quarterback or not. So it's to me more of just the philosophy angle of this more than it is about a love of Russ. I think Carroll loves Russell Wilson, but I think that Carroll really loves his brand of football even a little bit more. Randall McDaniel, I have this premonition of Russ being moved, and then he decides to take less and buy in. Yeah, Randall, I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen in all this. I think he's going to, when he does get traded, the first thing that's going to happen is the new deal. And I'd almost guarantee you that new deal, Russell is going to start taking a discount. Surprise, surprise. I'm sorry I'm behind in the chat. I will try to catch up here a little bit. I didn't realize I got so far behind. I thought I was being pretty quick today. Oh my gosh, I'm really far behind. My bad. Real bad. Seahawks, Jose Rodriguez says, fans trying to get Shaq to go to the Jets. I could see that. Makes a lot of sense, right, Jose? Robert Saleh's going there. He's got a lot of, he runs more of the wide nine Seahawks defense, but, he's going to need a Seahawks corner over there, and they've got a boatload of money to spend. They're just the type of team that could come in the fray and offer him $12 million a year that nobody, including ourselves, would really offer him. The GOAT 209, Kyle Juszczyk from the 49ers is a free agent. I hope he doesn't re-sign. I don't know how the 49ers, I've heard they've got negotiations ongoing right now, the GOAT, so I don't know if they're going to get it done. He's been a pretty vital piece for that offense and what they did. I wouldn't mind having him on our football team. Real useful player. Boom Shakalaka says, Russ ain't ever taken a discount. He's a man of material things now. That may be the case. I don't know, man. May be the case. Brandel, I have a feeling we're making a splash move or two. Something is brewing. I do too, Brandel. I think in this quietness is the quiet before the storm. There's something that's going to come through town. It's going to blow the doors off the hinges and knock the windows, shatter the windows, and send dust into all the homes. I don't know what it is, but I think something's coming. Brent, get out of the fishing rods and the $20 bills in the front row seat. Oh, get out the fishing rods and the $20 bills in the front row seats, a la A-Rod. Yeah. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see how Russell's received if this does go down like this. It would be very interesting to see how it goes. But I wonder what the equivalent would be if he did move on. Mark Hawk, Kyle Rudolph, Uncle Will, and Parkinson sound good to me. 3 separate skill sets and each big targets. Titans free agent tight end cost too much. Jonnu Smith is who you're talking about, Mark. And yeah, he's probably going to cost a lot. Still not been franchised yet by the Titans, which I find interesting. And Seattle has been rumored to make a real hard push for Jonnu Smith. I really like Smith a lot, I got to say. I'd like him a lot more than necessarily Rudolph, who's getting a little bit older at this point, Mark. With that said, that's not a bad combination of 3 guys. You've got no real game changers in there necessarily, but you got solid group, and maybe Parkinson can continue to develop a little bit. John, what's the likelihood that there are other teams that Russ has considered or will consider, especially since Dallas is out? Are other teams waiting for Deshaun to get moved to gauge the price for Russ? I think that there's other teams that have entered into this, John. I don't think that it's just the teams that he's talked to, and I think Seattle's probably gone to Russ and said, look, if we're going to open this door, we're not just going to open a door to 2 teams. Of the 4 teams you presented, really 2 of them are feasible, and even those 2 aren't really that feasible. I don't think Seattle's going to get held over that particular barrel in that way. Russ was just trying to, I think, push things in the direction that he kind of wanted them to go. So yeah, I think there are other teams that are going to be in on this necessarily. I don't know that the Deshaun Watson thing is going to necessarily impact this because we don't know yet that Houston's even really listening to offers really. The indications have been that they're still in that phase of we're not really even answering phone calls on this. Or if we're answering calls, it just be we'll listen, but we're really at this point not even going to be trading him. Cameron Vela, in your eyes, do you believe that Russ being traded is inevitable? Yeah, Cameron, whether it happens this offseason or next offseason, it's going to be inevitable. Because I'm talking about this offseason, it's reached a point for me that's 50-50. But this is a thing sliding every week further and further into the realm of getting higher and higher to the point of it being more probable that he's traded than he is that he remains. I had thought over the last week or two that we would have gotten the front office coming out and making a statement. Even if it's just a statement, not even doing a media press conference or a Zoom call. Just Carroll coming out and saying, just want to relay this again, that he's our quarterback, and this would be the standard operating procedure in this type of situation if it was going this way and you were wanting to keep the player in the fold. But the fact that there's this silence that's gone on and nothing has been said at all, and they're just sort of letting it sit out there and ruminate, that's the concerning part for me, Cameron, and that's what leads me to believe that they're more on board with this potential trade than I think a lot of people thought this front office would be at the start of this offseason. The GOAT 209, Alabama quarterbacks are all hype. Who Hurts, and now Mac Jones. Man, I'm hearing talk of Mac Jones going in the top 10 now. Top 10 for Mac Jones. My goodness. That's an overdraft in my opinion. Randall, is position taken into account for the franchise tag of offensive line, or are tackles, guards, and centers all lumped together? I know some positions don't make sense the way they're accounted for. They are separated. So tackles are the top 5 tackles, top 5 guards, top 5 centers, etc. Randall, you're lumped together in the respective left guards and right guards are lumped together. And I would probably go out on a limb and say left guards would probably tend to make a little bit more than right guards would. Just like left tackles tend to make probably a little more than right tackles do. But they are lumped together in that respect. I think it was the thing of the tight end. The tight end receiver one is the one that gets a little weird, especially when you have the tight end that's playing the H-back or sort of aligned a lot of times up in the slot, a la the Jimmy Graham thing with the Saints, where they were bickering back and forth whether or not he should be franchised at a tight end level or whether he should be franchised at a receiver level. I like Turtles. What's your thoughts on Trey Lance, and do you think Seattle could get him with the Chicago's first-round pick? I do. It seems like he might be sliding just a little bit, even though I do think he'll go in the first round, because it sort of seems like with Mac Jones's ascent has come Trey Lance's slight descent. He's not a perfect prospect. There's a lot of questions to his game. He didn't really play last year. That's 100% true. He didn't do an offense that had him throwing the ball over the football field, and you got to see him make all the throws consistently like you would have with maybe a Zach Wilson type. But he's got a big arm, plus mobility. He can throw a beautiful deep ball. I think he could work within the context of being a game manager in our type of offense, and I think he's got a lot of upside to him. So you're taking a risk with him. There is a bust factor with the guy, but I love his boom factor. Thomas Cox says, I'm tired of the drama. Either trade Wilson and rebuild like they did when they got the Legion of Boom, or do what Wilson wants. I agree. Has to get off the pot, right, Thomas? Like, let's stop being halfway in, halfway out. Go all in on a direction, or go all in on the alternative. It'll sink or swim. It'll fail or succeed, but at least then you've got a cogent plan in place, rather than this sort of internal debate that sort of is always ongoing, it seems like a little bit here. Nathaniel Park says, do you think it would have been better to trade Shaq Griffin at midseason mark last year? No, I think the best value was to keep him on. You didn't have a lot of corner depth by midseason. You knew that at that point, Dunbar that you brought in from Washington was done for the year. He was out. DJ Reed was hopefully going to step up for you. Trey Flowers, who had been up and down last year. So you just didn't have the kind of depth where you felt like you could move off from a midseason, especially you need some bodies out there. Thomas Cox, is Dante Fowler a free agent? Nope. He signed a multi-year deal last year with Atlanta. They can cut him, but that would be a dead money hit, and it seems like Atlanta's going to, right or wrong, kind of go for it again next season. Randall says, basically we want Carson, Shaq, and KJ to get paid. Maybe we get a couple of 4th or 5ths for them. Probably need to plug in young talent next offseason. 2019 guys start to leave. Yep, I agree with that. That'd be about right. 4th and 5ths are about what you can hope to get. 3rd would probably be a little too high, but you never know. Maybe the Jets will break the bank for Shaq and really overvalue him. But you're probably right. 4th and 5th is about the right spot. Brian Koski says, I want to see Colby Parkinson play ASAP. Let's see what we got. Well, to get you excited, Brian, when they drafted this guy, they had a first-round grade on him, supposedly. So if that doesn't get you a little more excited, I like this tape a bit coming out. Like him more as a pass catcher than a blocker. but he's really tall. He's really long. He's going to be able to get to some balls in spaces that I would think a 6'1", 6'2" cornerback covering him couldn't get to, because the guy's legitimately looks at times 6'7" out there on the football field. He's really big. Oh, Nathaniel, thank you for reminding me on that. Do please smash that like button if you happen to be listening to this right now live or on record. It does help this channel grow, gets me out there. We are just baby stepping our way, but we're getting very close to 4,000 subscribers. So I'd love to break through here this month and get through that mark on our way over to 5,000. Maxwell, how do you think Alton Robinson will do for us next season? I'd expect another year of development, Maxwell, and he should develop at a pace that's beyond what we've seen Rasheem Green develop at. I think he's a guy that you see him 4 sacks last year, not playing a lot of snaps, not getting a ton of playing time. Took him a while to start to really kind of move him into the mix and integrate him. I would expect them to do more of that next year. I would put him up at, I'm gonna go high on Alton next year. I'm gonna say Alton Robinson is gonna get you 8 sacks next year as a rotational pass rusher. He's going to be a real good guy for you in that respect. Kind of like what Kerry Hyder was for the 49ers this last year. I think Alton can give you somewhat of a similar impact. Randall McDaniel, Pitts is a better prospect than O.J. Howard? Yep. Yeah. His catching ability, his catching and his movement skills, his speed is beyond Howard. Now, Howard was very good in those attributes as well. Pitts is elite in all of those attributes. His ball skills are probably the best in the draft beyond any of the other, are the best in the draft beyond any other receivers. OJ was much better as a blocker, but is OJ's ability as a blocker far surpassed that of what Pitts gives you as a pass catcher? Because again, with Pitts, you can use him as a tight end or you can play him as a wide receiver. He'll go out there and he'll beat cornerbacks one-on-one. There's sometimes guys can't do anything with him sometimes, Randall, where you'll cover him and you'll be draped on him, but he just has such a wide catch radius. His arm's got to be 36 freaking inches long, and he just gets to balls that nobody should be able to get to. UE2K says Trey Lance going top 20, top 15 picks. Quarterbacks available with the Bears' first-round pick will be Trask, Mond, and Ellinger. There's no way Ellinger needs to be drafted in the first, second, third round at all. But you never know with Lance, Huey. I mean, there's a chance of him potentially dropping because of some of the factors I just talked about. Number 32, see Chris Carson is badass, so are his 3 dogs. Oh, Chris Carson is badass. Yeah. The Go299 says free Allen Robinson. Yeah, they franchised the poor guy. Over a 3-year stretch, no, I think 40% of the passes that have been targeted to Allen Robinson over the last 3 years have been and it's like triple that of the next guy behind him. You just watch the guy's highlights, and it's like, he'll be running and you'd normally expect ball placement to be right here in his hands. And suddenly he's whip snapping his hands out to catch a ball back across his body, back away from him. The man is just freakish in that realm of things. But he's got to be just banging his head against the wall. Of course, they get Russell there. I mean, I'm sure he's going to be a lot happier. Jose Rubio Lopez. Since Hasselbeck till now, Seahawks and Russ will come through win or lose. It's Seahawks up. No doubt Seahawks up. Yep, it sounds about right. I think I understood what you're saying there, Jose. And welcome on in the chat, man. This is until now, Seahawks and Russ will come through, win or lose. Yep, they will. Have a good night, Jose. UJ, Parkinson had anything he had gotten on the field more last year. If Parkinson had anything he'd have gotten on the field more last year. Maybe. Maybe. The thing to consider with this, Huey, is that you had a guy in Hollister, who was sort of sitting ahead of Parkinson, was a guy that has been here prior, who's a guy that had $3.2 million they were spending on last year, and who they were trying to get the value out of that $3.2 million. So I think that was preventing it, as you had 3 guys stacked up ahead of him a little bit. And the injury put him behind those guys. That foot injury put him behind him. Maxwell Stern says, I'm a fan of Yannick Ngakoue, probably better than Dunlap. I'm not so sure on that. I'm not so sure on that necessarily. Dunlap is better at run stuffing, much better in the run stuffing game. He can set the edge way better than Yannick Ngakoue can. Yannick would fit well with the Leo position to a degree. With his abilities as a pass rusher, he's a technician out there. I don't know if he's got the length they like out there normally for that. I think he's a little bit undersized for what they kind of like out there in that spot. But he's still a good player. Still a very good player. Gino, yo, been a while since I tuned into the stream. What's up, Gino? Good to see you, buddy. Randall says that the cap is $180 million in 2021. Quarterback salary needs to be $26 million or more. That's 14.5%. Yeah, it kind of shows you, Randall, too, that even on a lowered cap, you can still, as a quarterback, make a lot of the money, be under that 15%, and still make $25 million. You're making $10, $11 million past what the next guy on the roster is making beneath you. You're still making heads and tails up higher than anybody else. Brian Koski, the team owners' salaries are crazy as F. They are. Nathan Parks, I don't know. I know you suggested trading Bobby. Why? Pete Carroll ain't going anywhere, and Pete's philosophy is to stop the run and not give up the big play. Bobby is a good run stuffer. He ain't leaving. It's a little bit like it's a situation where, Nathaniel, this is what you've done recently in drafts is you've gotten guys and then you're just having them kind of sit on the bench and not getting any value out of them. When we know within the modern NFL that the good teams in the NFL, those teams that succeed, draft well and are able to get great value out of the young players that they've drafted. One of the big problems with this team over recent years is that they've gone the other direction. They're constantly missing in the draft and then overpaying to bring in resources to fix situations that could have been fixed if they just drafted correctly in the first place. So when you look at a guy like Marquise Blair, for instance, you draft this guy, you bring him in. He's a guy who looks like he could play strong safety or free safety in this scheme, but then yet you go make the Quandre Diggs trade, not giving him a pathway to free safety. Okay, well, look at strong safety. But then you go out and you make a trade for Jamal Adams, now not giving him a pathway to get to strong safety. So now you've taken a very high second-round pick and basically feasibly punted the first year, and you wouldn't have necessarily punted the second year, but we don't know how good he would have been as a slot corner. That's not what he played in college. That's not his true position. And this team has a history of moving players out of position incorrectly and then watching them play lesser below their potential because they are being asked to play out of position. So what I don't like is to waste second-round picks. What I don't like is to waste first-round picks. Jordan Brooks was selected in this draft a year ago. The guy is a middle linebacker. He's not a Sam linebacker. He's not a Will linebacker. He can play both of those positions, but he's not going to play them well. He's a middle linebacker. That's what he was in college. That's his best. If you gave Coach Carroll sodium pentothal, the truth-telling drug, injected into his vein and said, Coach Carroll, what's Jordan Brooks' best position? Where is he going to play at his best in the NFL? He would say, middle linebacker. And so what you see here is this commonality now popping up where you have players you've drafted very high, put a lot of draft capital in a given player, but you're having them sit on the bench because you've gone over and had to overpay for resources to fill in the other area of things. So when it comes to Jordan Brooks sitting on the bench next year playing the will and getting blazed up in coverage playing the will versus moving him over to middle linebacker where he could potentially become what I think is even a star over there or a Pro Bowl level player at the middle linebacker position, my feeling on that is you move the cheap young guy to the middle linebacker and you move on from the old guy and you save the $10 million in cap space and better spend that in other areas. Front load up in front of Jordan so he's clean and can run around all day and doesn't have to worry about guards getting down to him in the second level. But I'm okay as well with Bobby staying. That's just why I was thinking you potentially go that route. I like turtles. It's hard, but I think we have to have 1 year of growing pains to see if we can develop some young guys on defense. And in this year's draft, without Russell Wilson in our future, it's time to reset. Could be. Maxwell, if Russ isn't traded within the next 7 days, which is when free agency is, will he be traded this season? Yeah, I mean, I think it's much more unlikely. From what I would say from that, Maxwell, is much more unlikely he is traded if this gets to free agency and Russell's not been moved. Much more likely at that point, I would shift my 50-50 back down to 40-30%. He could still be moved, just a lot less likely it happens because you'd want to make your corresponding moves in free agency to counter what you're having to do with moving on from Russell Wilson. The Go209 says, all that Dunlap cutting just so we can overpay another tight end. Jonnu Smith didn't get tagged. He didn't. I watched his tape, Goat. I broke it down on the show a couple weeks ago, man. I really like Jonnu Smith's tape. He's only going to be 25 years old, really young guy. I know it seemed he's not Greg Olsen. He's not Dixon from a couple of years ago that we brought in. You know, this is something else. He's a very good player. Randall, I think Russell Wilson is set for a $35 million hit in 2021. The difference between 14.5% and 19.4% is about Gabe Jackson, $8 to $9 million. Yep. 312, my Steelers will win the Super Bowl next season. Mark my words. 312, you feeling good about Roethlisberger right now, man? I mean, he fell off the Drew Brees cliff last year, didn't he? I mean, he did. It was the Looney Tunes thing where he's running. And his legs are still moving, right? His little feet are still dancing on the air, but he's just going right over the canyon. Right over the canyon. That's what it looked like to me. UE2K signed Thuney and Blythe in free agency. Draft running back Javonte Williams, Tommy Tremble, defensive end Shaka Toney, and Shakur Brown. UE, I'd love that draft. I'd love all that. I'd love all that, man. I love all that. You know I'm big on Tremble at this point. He's my number 2 tight end on my board right now. He is ahead of Brevin Jordan. I like him that much. And Javonte Williams, sign me up all day long. 312, this isn't a good win move now. Russ to Pittsburgh. Oh, no, it'd be a good move for Pittsburgh to do that. It would be a good move for Pittsburgh. The problem is 312 is you guys just renegotiated the contract with Ben. He saves you $15 million on your cap. He's riding out on $14 million base throughout the next year. You guys aren't going off from Ben. You're strapping the horses you're hitching the horses to the cart for one more year. I don't think it's smart by Pittsburgh, but maybe they just didn't think there was another quarterback that was going to get even on an equivalent point as to what Ben was going to give him this year. The Go209 says start scouting kickers and punters because Seattle's taking them in round 1. We don't have a round one pick, my guy. I like turtles. Seattle is like a boat with too many holes. The flex tape and bubble gum can only last so long before we sink as a franchise. Time to bring the boat in and rebuild. That's a little bit of my feeling on it too. I like turtles. I think that I don't know if it's big holes. It's just you've had enough holes that just kept you from getting to max speed every year, being the Super Bowl or conference championship. You're just you're muddling through, and we can see this plateauing effect where it's 5-6 years of it, and it seems like you're on the same track for next year. Where hard to see you get into the 11 wins you got to this year. And you're kind of maintaining. Got to do something a little bit more extreme to change this up a bit. James Black says, just saw the headline. Wow, this is dumb. I'm sorry you feel that way, James. Mark Hawk, Aldon Smith seems to be in about the right price range they're going to be able to pay if they go out and upgrade the offensive line with Blythe at center and Thuney at left guard. Yeah, you just have enough money to put him in there, I think. I can't think him and Clowney would be about in the same situation for different reasons, where just a 1 to 2 year deal is right around the camp of where you'd probably put them. And with Dallas now signing Dak, I don't think they're going to have the money to bring back Alden into the fray like I know they wanted to. I like Turtle says, I'm at peace with Russell being gone. I think more are getting there. I think more and more by the day folks are getting there. Randall McDaniel says Najee Harris equals Steven Jackson. I love that comparison, Randall. I do. I love that comparison. A little bit not as big maybe, but maybe a little more of the side-to-side ability, right? But yeah, I could see it. Very similar in a lot of similarities to their game. Maxwell Stern says Malcolm Butler was released today. Imagine the memes if Seattle signed him. Yeah. Yeah, that would not be, no, I don't want to see that. I don't, my goodness. I don't know. Malcolm can't seem to settle down anywhere and really hold up. He seems like he always gets interceptions and picks wherever he kind of goes, but for whatever reason, just doesn't quite ever just land and stay. Thomas, maybe it's time to rebuild. The Wilson trade could be like the Cowboys and Walker trade. A lot of picks and more salary cap. Yeah, You get yourself a lot of draft picks and you get yourself some salary room. You got some movement. You can do some stuff here, you know. You're not the thought process that we're just doomed at that point. There's no chance. I don't subscribe to that. Doesn't mean moving on from Russ is the pathway and gateway to us getting back to the championship. It's just, it would be a major move to swing this in a different direction and try something new. Thomas Cox, maybe it's time to rebuild. The Wilson trade could be like the Nathaniel Parks, Phil Haynes to starting left guard. He's sort of the guy right now, isn't he? He's the slotted left guard for us. Randall says, I'm at peace with Russell Wilson departing too. Part of me wants to see a young guy again. Yeah, there's a bit of me with that as well. There's a little bit of me in that too. I'd be sad to see him go, but there's a bit of there too with me. I get it, guys. I do. I like Turtles. I think we all know Russell is leaving. All major sports stars leave Seattle. It's time to brace yourself for what we know is coming. Yeah, well said, man. Well said. Daniel W. says, Jets make the most sense. Saleh saw Russell dominate. New York is the biggest market, and the 49ers passing game coordinator is the new offensive coordinator, so they will have the 49ers style offense. They will. And, I mean, they could look at him as a possibility on that. Daniel, does Russell buy into the fact that they're going to build around letting him cook and throw the ball, or are they going to try to run the ball predominantly? Because that 49er offense was not all that interested in throwing the ball very often. And that's something that Russell really does want at this point, it seems like. All four of the teams that he put out there on his list of teams he wanted to go to are teams that have an offensive-minded head coach, would build the offense essentially around him. I'm not sure Saul is going to is being as willing to do that. I think he's going to want to build up a big defense because he's a defensive-minded coach. And that tends to be what the defensive-minded coaches tend to do and how they build their teams. It's very rare you get a defensive-minded coach who's going to embrace building an offense-first approach. So I don't know if I can see it. They're a possibility. They got the draft capital. But again, when you look at them with what they're sitting at, I think they're pretty happy to just stand pat and take Wilson, whose name is really ascending up boards at this point. You know, Zach Wilson's really blowing up. Insanity mixes, Dunlap resigns. I don't think he's going to resign. Nope. I think once you cut him away, he's gone. Sean Harker, you're thinking of Dick LeBeau. That's it. Not Dom Capers, but Dick LeBeau. What do you have, 65 career interceptions, Sean? Not bad. I know it's a different era. Brent McKinney, thank you for the $5 donation, my sir. I appreciate you. It looks like your message got deleted. Feel free to put it back in there if I'll look for your name on it. So I appreciate the dono, and thanks for watching. Appreciate you all watching right now. I know it's kind of just an odd Tuesday here, so thanks for checking me out. Half Baked is a classic, 100%, 100% a classic. Hilarious movie. I do wish Chris Carson a lot of luck too, Brian. I know he will. I hope he gets paid some money. He's earned a contract. Jace, do I still think Lockett will go? I want him to for cap and draft picks, but I think he might stay. Yep. I still arrive on the point of thinking that Lockett's probably going to be moved off from this offseason. We continue to not hear any word of a contract extension with him, which would be the other thing I think we'd hear if not a trade. And I think that extension would have probably come down by now if it was going to come down. So I think you're probably looking at Tyler Lockett being moved on at this point. Sean Arker, I want Mack and Jalen Johnson in the deal. I'm okay with Mack. Jalen Johnson's tape from last year in the draft was like not good out of Utah. I didn't love it at all. He's a guy who theoretically did a lot of his own stuff at Utah last year, a very toolsy cornerback, but a guy who just with too many rough edges, I think, to fit in the scheme here. Jeff Rhines, how you doing, Jeff? Hello, hello, hello. He says, what's up, Brandon? Hope all is well. All is absolutely well, Jeff. Hope you're doing good, too. It's been a crazy 2 months, and my work schedule has been usually when you've been streaming. Hope to catch more of you soon. Cheers from Montana. Hey, cheers to you, too, Jeff. I'm looking to do it, of course, I'll be doing free agency, the opening day of free agency, all 3 days of the draft. We'll do some more of these kind of random streams here and there where I can to kind of do it different times of the day. Because we got a lot of European folks, too. I know it comes on at different times over there really late, so it's hard for them to catch it live. I like to change it up a little bit for you folks. So I'm glad you can catch it, though, man. Thanks for jumping in. Randall, thank you for the $20 donation. Sorry it took me a while to get to the dono on it. I've been just deep on the comments today, but thank you so much, man. Always really nice of you to come in strong on the donos. You know, I appreciate it, brother. He says, if we trade Russ to the Bears, I wonder what our plan is at quarterback. Please, God, not Alex Smith. No, I don't want Alex Smith either at Randall. I don't want to watch a bleeding leg in a game next year. That was a horrible image to see this last season, and he doesn't excite me as a quarterback at all. Tyrod Taylor, how about that, Randall? How's that for an idea? Tyrod Taylor and a rookie quarterback are your two. I think they will go competition based here. I think you're going to look at them looking to get a young quarterback and get a veteran quarterback at the same time to compete, a la the Matt Flynn, Russell Wilson competition that you had kind of going on at that time. But I do think they'll go in both of the different directions. Could be a Marcus Mariota and a young quarterback. The one thing is the key on this is if you do trade Russ, next year's quarterback class looks horrible. So you're going to want to try to get your quarterback in this draft. Thank you, though, for that $20 donation, man. You rock, bro. I appreciate you. Thomas Cox, don't you get the feeling Russ will be traded to Carolina, New York, or Miami? Thomas, I'm kind of feeling like the front runners here are Chicago. I think Carolina's the silent assassin that could jump into the fray here. Just decide to go all into the center of the table. They've got some interesting players that they could offer as far as that would, I think, appeal to Carroll, especially defensive players that they could offer that would appeal to Carroll. So they certainly would be an interesting one. I've long thought Miami, New York make a lot of sense, and it was surprising me, Thomas, that they weren't on Russell's initial list. But I think part of it, Thomas, too, is that he's got the no trade clause. So he's got to sign off on going to Miami or going to New York, going to a defensive-minded head coach who's not going to let him cook. And that's the part where I'm a little hesitant to believe that he'd be willing to accept that. Jake Mason, Dunlap signs with the Rams, and there's somehow unlimited salary cap that they have every year. Facts, Jake. Facts, man. I felt the same thing today about the Saints. I'm watching like the Saints, and I'm anticipating like Williams is going to be released, this former second-round safety that's due for a new contract. They somehow find a way to franchise the guy. And you're going, and meanwhile, we're playing by the rules. We're right up against the cap. We got to make some tough decisions. It's like, God, when do other teams guys are making some tough decisions? Shane Hafner, thoughts on the Hawks signing Aaron Jones? Hard to see it happening, Shane, and a couple reasons for this. Number one, you don't have a lot of money to spend. You got bigger holes on the football team. He's not a running back that fits into the traditional mold of what Coach Carroll looks for in running backs. These would all be factors that would lend me to believe that no, you wouldn't look to him at that point, and probably some other team will break the bank for him at that point. $15 million a year for Aaron Jones, I just can't see Seattle being interested in that at all. Gino says Seattle signing Kenyon Drake. You just watch. Maybe, Gino, maybe. He certainly did not impress really all that much more with the Cardinals from what he did with Miami. He had the one good game against us, I think, a year ago, but didn't do a whole lot with the Cardinals. I thought the Edmonds kid, when he was in, looked better for the Cardinals than he did. Sean Harker, that's what I was thinking too, is that you're starting out with Carolina, you're looking at Brian Burns and the number 8 pick as a beginning point, and that's something that gets Seattle excited. I think they were really high on Brian Burns a couple drafts ago, and were shocked that he got picked as high as he did. Really young player, guy that would be a perfect Leo fit for Coach Carroll in the system. You could actually flip him both ways. You could do some 4 or 5 tech as well. In that number 8 overall pick, you'd be able to get your quarterback of the future at the same point in time. So, Sean, great point, man. Great point. Shane says, I try not to overreact, but I find it very odd that the Seahawks season ticket holders letter mentions DK and Lockett, but no Russ. You would think the letter would include their franchise quarterback. It was odd. I don't think the letter's an indicator necessarily that Russell's going to be moved, Shane. I think this was one point I heard Mike Florio bring up that was an interesting point, being he's a former lawyer, and I think there's certain spots where certain guys have an expertise on. You can listen to him, and with Florio, that I take him with a grain of salt mostly, but on this I gave a little bit more, okay, I'll hear what you got to say on this, being that when you're making up those letters to season ticket holders, you're trying to get the season ticket holders to sign up for another year of season tickets. So if you're going to put Russell Wilson in there, you're theoretically, from a legal department standpoint, selling season ticket holders on having player A. And if player A may not be here, if there's even a chance he may not be here, you don't want to sell that in the season ticket letter that you send out. So this was a little bit, I think, because they're trying to avoid, we live in a litigious society. People are always trying to throw lawsuits about. This is, to me, a little bit of the lawyers for the team just making sure that they don't get themselves into any troubled waters. I like Turtles. As a Seahawk fan, I'm tired of bargaining shopping for guys that don't have a lot of gas in the tank. We need to try to rebuild through the draft, maybe take a year to try and develop young guys. I'd be okay with this. I like Turtles. Take a year. If it's going to take a year, we're not great for a year, I'm okay with that, to get yourself back around to a more firmer position, to a more higher upside, to no more plateauing. I'm okay with that as a potential sacrifice. John Robinson says, is it true Dak Prescott's hit is $70 million next year? How are the Cowboys going to maneuver that cap with all these high-end contracts? I'd have to look at the details of that, John. Off the top of my head, though, I do know that they recently, in the last draft, in the last year, the Cowboys were one of a few teams that were actually had cap space to roll over, I believe. I'm trying to double check this. Yeah, boys. So they moved over $26 million in cap space. From this last year, they had $26 million in cap space they were able to roll over into this next cap. So this next year's cap for the Cowboys is technically speaking going to be sitting at approximately $206 million or so. So they are a little bit in a bit of a tangle with that one, you could say. But if you look into, let's say it is a $70 million by next year I would reckon they can probably get out from DeMarcus Lawrence's contract with saving some money. They can get out of Tyron Smith's contract with saving some money. They'll get out of Zach Martin's contract by that point, saving some money, and maybe even Jalen Smith's contract. The cumulative of those four, I would think, would bring them to a place where they could take and maneuver around that hit. Randall, I wonder if Russ would accept a deal to the Washington football team. He's from that area, decent-sized market, close to New York. They have players all over that roster that I'd want. It's an interesting fit, Randall, but again, you come back to will Russell play for a defensive-minded coach again after playing his first 10 years with a defensive-minded coach who has wore him out on his defensive sensibilities? I don't think he wants to. I think he wants to go to the full meal deal. The full meal deal. Give me the offensive attack wide open. Let me cook. Let me roll up tempo, throwing on first down, scoring 24 points and a half. He wants that. And I don't think that Ron Rivera is exactly that. Brian Koski says, I probably chew gum once a year. I don't know why. It's been years for me that I chewed gum. When I learned that they put aspartame in that stuff, I was like, and learned what aspartame was, I was like, I'm going to stop chewing gum. Thomas Cox, I thought, why wouldn't Russ ask a trade with the Jags? Shoddy and Bevel are there. It does make some sense with that, Thomas, but I think the impression I've got on this situation with the Jags is that they are fully in love with Trevor Lawrence, and they buy into him being a very special quarterback at the next level. And if that's where they believe, then why would they look for Russell? I think the Shoddy and Bevel hire are more about, especially in Bevel's case, being the offensive coordinator, being a guy who brought a rookie quarterback in and helped him develop along, understood the speed by which you have to develop a young quarterback coming out of college. I think that interested Urban Meyer quite a bit, especially with Bevel's history with Russell Wilson. And then Schottenheimer, they brought in, I think, is just a guy best suited in his position where he's not an offensive coordinator either, but either a quarterback's coach or a passing coordinator, something like that. I think that's Shoddy's best role. So Urban may realize that. I like Turtles. I want a 6'5" quarterback who can sit in the pocket and see over offensive linemen and hit guys in the middle of the field. I do too. I'd like to have the next quarterback we have back. I'd like to have a guy that can make sure all the throws can be made on a football field. There's no spots where it's like, well, we can't have him throw to there. Shane Abner says, why the hell would Russ want to move his fam to Chicago? Well, I think supposedly there's a little bit of Sierra really likes Chicago. Russ digs it too. He could go there and be a savior of a franchise in two different places at that point if he was able to win there. They have a team that's a little bit on the up and coming. Guys like David Montgomery's an interesting young talent. They got a slot receiver there who's really coming along. A lot of people feel like he'd be a star. You got Allen Robinson's there. Cole Kmet paired with Jimmy Graham. If those two guys were there, the offensive line isn't horrible. This was a team that was, I think, just right on the edge. Didn't they make the playoffs last year with, nothing at quarterback? So if Russell looks at them as not getting this last year, even getting there with a nothing burger at quarterback, then why wouldn't he look at them as, if you add me into the mix now, I can take that team over the top? I certainly think Russell could do that. It does appear to me to a degree as well. You look at Las Vegas, Chicago, New Orleans, three of the towns that were selected here were entertainment-type towns, which you would think would appeal to a musician wife. And that maybe some of that factors into this as well, is that there's extra factors involved into where Russ is necessarily choosing to go. Sean Arker says, if we keep Russ, we have to get a third wide receiver, a tight end, left guard, center, edge, and figure out what to do with KJ. You just can't bring KJ back, I don't think, Sean, unless he has his sort of hat-in-hand moment where he realizes the market out there just isn't that deep for him, and he's going to have to take what he can take with us. Just the way it kind of is going to go with KJ, unfortunately. I agree with everything on your list. I'd probably add into it running back as well. You needed to address running back in there, but all the other items you put in there are right on the button. Larry Bird says, like the beard, talk me into a way to get Watson. Watson's going to be hard because, if Chicago theoretically wanted Watson, why couldn't they theoretically offer the package that they would offer us to get Russell Wilson over to Watson? They would take that package. The only thing I can go to and think to on that is that, they don't see a pathway to getting the return quarterback that they need in place. They're moving on from Watson, nor to Seattle at this point at 20, the first pick in the draft that Chicago has. So that being the case, I don't know how you get Watson there with it unless you just blow Houston out of the water. You blow Houston out of the water with a bigger offer than essentially what you're getting from the Bears. So if it's 3 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, and Khalil Mack, you're flipping all of that plus an additional couple third-round picks to Houston, and you just sell them on that. I don't think Seattle would go all in on it like that. I don't think they would go from Russ and pivot back over to Deshaun Watson. I certainly would applaud it if they did. It would be a very innovative way of doing it. But just the indicators seem to be here is that Houston's just not ready to release this guy. That there's part of them are still trying to hold him in, keep him there. But it would be interesting if they did. Brian says the Bears won't get Russell Wilson. Maybe not. They certainly have a hard time of doing it, Brian, from a resource standpoint. They don't have necessarily what you would want or expect to get in return. Jose Rubio, I was thinking you meant that they won't trade Russ unless there was a good idea behind it. Seahawks make pros, Curse, Baldwin, Tupu, Golden Tate, Lynch. We'll do it again. Yeah, you can get back to mountaintop again with different players, Jose. There's not just one player that can get you there. And yeah, I don't think they'll trade Russ unless they feel like they're going to get appropriate value back from him, Jose. Absolutely. Gino says, ladies and gentlemen, your 2021-2022 starting quarterback, Mitchell Trubisky. I hope not, Gino. I hate Mitchell Trubisky as a quarterback. He's everything wrong about the quarterback position. Jeff Rhines with a $5 donation. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate you, man. Appreciate you big time. Glad to finally catch the stream today. I am very glad you're able to catch it from Montana. Hope you're not too cold over there, man. It's the middle of winter over there. I remember how it feels when right about now it's biting. It's biting. Your skin's dry, crusted. My work's been taking up a ton of time. Keep on killing on the channel, Brandon. Go Hawks. Thank you, Jeff. I really do appreciate it, man. Thanks for the donation, too. You were very kind and always very kind. Thank you so much. Antoine, Elizabeth Gobb. This kind of in a way reminds me of when Mike Holmgren came in and didn't get along with Joey Galloway and traded him. Imagine the Holmgren team with Galloway on them. Yeah, it was going to be hard for Galloway, Antoine. It was going to be really tough for Galloway. Galloway was your quintessential, going to find a way to get open, speedster guy, going to beat people over the top. I mean, just incredibly fast. One of the all-time fastest receivers we've had in this sport. Bar none. Bar none. In his prime, he could move. Holmgren was a guy who came from the passing attack being the purified West Coast passing attack is what I've called it. And this is where you come from the Bill Walsh school of this, where Bill Walsh would do something that not a lot of teams do, which is actually ask the receivers to count their steps in their route. You're going to run a 9-step out route. And like you hear receivers lament this at the time, especially new receivers under Holmgren going, man, it just takes me a second to think about counting my steps on where I'm going rather than just, 10 yards and make my move. So Galloway was going to be really hard in fitting into Holmgren's offense because his skill set as a route runner really wasn't there to be able to do it that way exactly. Just wasn't going to be quite a fit for it. I will say too, man, you got 2 first-round picks for Galloway. That was some pretty good draft capital that they were able to pull away from him at that time. I think they used one of them to get Hutchinson and Alexander, something like that. So you got some pretty good value back in return from that. That's selling high on a player at that time who wasn't exactly a fit for what you were going to do. Randall says, if we got Mack in the deal, could we make a provision where Chicago pays part of the salary in 2021 to offset the dead cap? It happened with Clowney, but he was a franchise tag guy. The time when it happened with Clowney, it's the first time I've heard of it happening even with the franchise, Randall. I wasn't aware that you could even do that. I was under the impression when a player's on your squad, they're on your squad. And you're paying the full meal deal there. The full hit lands on you at that point once the trade has been consummated. So I don't have a good answer for you on that if you could. I would think not. And that for whatever reason, the franchise tag allowed that particular situation to happen with Clowney where Houston paid half his salary for the year. But I don't think that they would allow it on a deal like this. Randall says, we got Sean Alexander with the Galloway pick, also Corn Robinson. Yeah, the Corn was a brutal one, but you did get Sean. So, I mean, Sean Alexander's impact on this offense versus what Galloway would have had on this offense, I think that alone was probably a better route to go for Holmgren. Galloway would be interesting. That's it. I just don't know. I never really saw Galloway as a guy that really became a master route runner or a guy that was really refined at his craft. And maybe I'm selling him short here, where he just always struck me as that guy with the freakish talent, being the speedster with pretty good hands, and speedster being just fast even for NFL fast. I mean, like 4.2, 40 type fast receiver. Thomas Cox says, Cosell says Seattle should take Minshew if they trade Wilson. I'm okay with doing it as a one-year flyer type deal and you're not trying to long-term plan to build around Minshew. You're looking to grab Minshew and then have Kellen Mond come in and those are your two guys competing. I guess it makes sense from that point, Thomas. He's not going to cost a lot to bring in over here. The one thing is he's after this year, this third year, he's going to be due for then a contract extension. You'll hit year 4. He's a 6th, 7th round guy. What are you going to do with him at that point? Do you just lose him for no value at that point? I'd be very hesitant to trade for players this offseason that are just going to be then walking out the door after a year, especially if I'm not at a place of competing quite yet, or I'm looking at doing a reset. Too bad Minshew was a Coug. Sean Harker says, Russ peaked. If he wants out, move on from it. Get the picks. I think we have to get a top 10 pick this year to make it happen. I'm in the same boat, Sean. If he does want out, if it's a situation broken beyond all repair, we can lament and cry about it and sob into our pillows. Doesn't change the reality of which he wants out and he's not happy. And if that is the case, then you move on, in my opinion. And he may have peaked. He may be right, Randall. I mean, we don't know for sure. We've never, the one thing that's a question, Sean, is we've never seen Russell Wilson with a offensive-minded approach, an offense built around him and his skill set, and him allowed to then take advantage fully on. He may not have the capability in him to do it, but he's never been put in a position to have the opportunity to do it. Sean says, get a quarterback on a 5-year rookie deal. I think that's the ideal, Sean, is replicate what you had before, get the young, talented rookie quarterback on the rookie deal, or the young, talented quarterback on the rookie deal who's got ability to move. You can use the movement game that these young quarterbacks are coming out, and he can do all the scrambling you need him to do back there. All the especially the play action stuff with Waldron's scheme. Waldron's scheme's going to ask for the play action. Off that play action, there's going to be a lot of open boots and space for that quarterback to get out there and get some easy yards to run in space. So getting a quarterback like that too, I think, is very important because of that. Randall McDowell says, I've heard Mike Robinson be pretty candid on Russ. Basically said the team laid you twice over multiple Hall of Fame, or close to laid you twice. Oh, okay. I think that's what Russ is saying, that, Mike Robinson saying, be careful, Russ, on how much you're putting yourself kind of at the top of this pile. And I think Robinson's the guy who's got a key voice on this, being a former player who was here in that locker room and has been around those voices that have talked a little bit about Russ and understands a lot of the situation. I've heard the same thing, Randall, where he's been very candid on Russ and willing to kind of not just be like, well, Russ is all right and it's the front office all wrong here. I don't think he's been that way necessarily, like you're saying. And I agree. I think I think if Russ's camp understood a little bit of the way he would look in retrospect of this situation and coming out in the media at the start of this whole process, I think they might have handled this a little bit differently. Gino says, let's be honest, the Seahawks should have 3 Super Bowls, not 1. Facts, Gino. Facts, man. Shaggy4019. Russell Wilson's cap hit in 2021 was $31 million even. Tom Brady's was $28.4 million. A measly $2.6 million difference or 1.3% of the salary cap. Still, the Bucs put together an insanely talented team top to bottom. Yeah, it's the place I see folks go to when they're making the comparison of Russ as to why he shouldn't take a discount or why taking a discount doesn't matter in the big frame of things. So let's start at the Shaggy at just the beginning of this. We can go if or maybe or not. Take Tom. We can both agree, I think, at the start of the Shaggy that Tom Brady is a little bit of an outlier, right? Russell Wilson's not Tom Brady. Russell Wilson's not in Brady's camp. He's not as good. Brady is what he is. He's elevated himself far and beyond any other quarterback to play this game. It's no thing to say. It's no huge detriment to say you're not at Brady's level. No quarterback's at Brady's level. So that's the first thing that we got to say alone. To make the comparison between the two of them is not super appropriate just for that reason alone, I would argue. As well as you take Tom Brady out of the mix, Shaggy, you look over 30 years of data. A quarterback can't make past basically 10% of the cap and win a Super Bowl. That's 30 years of data, removing the one outlier player who's been able to break that rule. A player who as I just commented on, I don't think Russell's in that same camp. The other part that you got to factor in here is it's not like Tom Brady had a team and then the team built up around him in Tampa Bay, this great team. They had a fantastic team in place because the team had been losers for many seasons, got high draft picks, got to clear cap space off the board, and put themselves in the perfect advantageous position. Brady essentially got to take 32 teams throughout the NFL and handpick the exact perfect right team for him to fit himself in. To again, take that as a rule of thumb or to take that comparatively to what our situation is and go, it's an apples for apples, I think is a little bit of a mischaracterization of the situation. And I don't think that it's doing the situation right by necessarily playing it in that direction of things. How many Bucs-like teams are out there that are just that one quarterback away from getting into the Super Bowl? Not that many. Not that many, in my opinion. And if you're allowed to handpick your team, it's a good chance that you can probably take a little bit more money at that point and still the team end up being good because you're handpicking a team with the cap space, handpicking a team that has drafted well, handpicking a team with the young, talented talent that's just getting ready to explode. Shane Hafner, can the Bucs afford to keep Shaq Barrett after they signed Levante David to a 2-year, $25 million deal? It's going to be hard for them to do it, Shane. It's going to be very hard to make this deal work for them. So Brady looks like he's going to renegotiate here now again. So if he renegotiates his contract down quite substantially, and they can fit it in at that point, but that's probably going to be what I think that's probably going to be the indicator here. Sean Harger says we shouldn't have even been in Super Bowl 49. Russ threw 5 picks and got bailed out with a fake field goal and an onside kick recovery. He made a great play on that. Oh yeah, no, you're right. Yep. Good chance we couldn't have been. That was definitely a freakish day game. Seahawks gaming. Brady has Godwin, Evans, Antonio Brown, clown, but wants Odell too. I think he would want Seahawks gaming Odell instead of Antonio. Antonio would move on. They would bring out Odell in to replace Antonio. I think that's what he's thinking of there. Rather than having I don't think he wants not enough balls to go around. You'd have some angry divas in that locker room. Would you take Mitchell, Trubisky in a trade, even if it's basically a throw-in? We get one less third or something? No, because he carries like a $10 million cap hit. I'm not paying Trubisky $10 million this year. No way. No way. Randall says Dickinson has had a couple of knee injuries. Also, he's a bit old, only played center at a few years. There are the negatives. I'd love him in round 3. And he might slide to round 3 because of that too, Randall. I just like the compliment of the guy that when I watch him play, there's things technically very good, and he's got the freakish size and ability you like at center that you don't normally get, where the centers tend to be the guys that are not quite as big, not quite as fleet of foot, super smart guys, just not necessarily that. And all accounts seems like a real leader down there at the middle of that deal. So I definitely there's injury worries with him, no doubt about it. Thomas Cox, what do you think of Keith Taylor or Bynum? I have not looked at either of those two guys, man. But I will add them to my list and take a look. I will take a look at them. Sorry, man. Haven't had a chance yet. I'm getting through the prospects, slow but sure. Maxwell Stern says Mike Fleury just said the cap space will be about $182.5 million, which puts us at about $21.1 million, but I don't know how accurate this is. We'll have to see. We'll have to see what it's released at. It's going to be around the $180 million mark, Maxwell, that's for sure. So I think that whether it's another couple million or not, I think that's still puts it basically where it was at and where we thought it was at. Which 2.5 million more is a little more helpful, I guess, at least. Sean Harker, Seahawks will pick a Sebo Paulson. I think he's going to be a guy they target, Sean, especially in that fifth round range. Could be even a guy that falls into the 6th round. But he fits all the markers of what they look for in a cornerback. I like the guy quite a bit. Not a finished product by any respect, but he was a young guy too. And he got no film to go off of with him in the last season because he sat out. So you got to go on his 2019 tape and when he was really still very young at that time. But flashes, looks like a really good player and a guy who would fit within our scheme, being able to play zone. Random McDaniel says, if you watch Tevin Jenkins from Oklahoma State, he's a right tackle, says he likes the right side or admits that it's his best side. We know he can pass block in that offense. He's a big boy. Let me take a look. I know he has been one of the guys I have looked at, so let me see what my notes are on him. Tevin Jenkins, right? Jenkins. I was way off. Tevin Jenkins, to your point, I've got him right off the gate here as he's more of your traditional right tackle. He's probably more comfortable going forward than he is in pass protection. That's why I said he is more of your traditional tackle, kind of because of that. He just wants to be a road grader going downhill. I don't know there'd be a big difference between him and a guy like Brandon Shell. They'd be very, very similar in the player type and what they do. He's not horrible in pass pro. He's not a whiffer. He's not a guy that just gets routinely beat on the edge. If he's got a speed rusher, running the arc by him, he can handle both power and speed rushers relatively well. It's just not the strength of his game. And this is why why you're on the right side. It's why you're not the left side, blind side protector. There's a little bit of an issue with him at times when you get stacked fronts and he'll just miss a blitzer. He'll choose wrong on which direction he's going to block. So an overloaded front, he's just going to, and some of this is coaching, so it is fixable. But he certainly would have times where he'd get a little bit lost out there when you put too many guys on the defensive line. He's got 2 guys in front of him, and it's like he's going to split the difference and block neither at times. But very good power, super strong guy. I mean, he's an ox out there. He's going to move people off the ball at the next level. I think it's going to translate at the next level in his ability with that. He's got a very nasty element to his game. He's a finisher. Not all the offensive linemen in this draft are finishers. He's one guy I would say is a finisher. That's going to fit well for a team that wants to run the ball like we want to run the ball. He stays on his block, keeps on his block, doesn't just give up or look to end, finish up and be like, okay, did I do enough? Do I do the bare minimum? Like Alex Leatherwood does of Alabama. He's a lot like that. This guy's not that way. He's another guy, though, that I do come back to, Randall, and I wonder if he would be better suited to more of the man-on-man scheme. I don't know if he's as good necessarily in zone because he's not as fleet of foot. Cannot cut block to save his life. Cut blocking's already been kind of moved out of the game more and more as we go on, but it's also not an element that he can really do. But he's a guy I wonder with that is he's going to be as good in double teaming or is he just a guy you want to put mano-a-mano and let her hammer a guy plan and play out over there. Could work, though. Could work. I kind of want to see on him with the testing numbers of where he is on the short area stuff. Is he a guy that's going to run the 4, the 5.5 40 and be really slow out the first 10-yard split? That might make me a little hesitant because he's going to struggle with some of the reach blocking stuff we're going to ask our tackles to do at that point. But he's a good prospect. I've got him in more of the territory of like late 2nd, 3rd round. I think he's even being pushed up into the 2nd roundish area. But I do think he's got a couple holes into his game to keep him from really getting to that mark. A couple other tackles I think I just like a little bit more, Randall. But I'd be okay with him as a future prospect. He's a solid guy. Seahawks gaming. Can I talk about the 49ers free agents? Yeah, I'll go off the top of my head a little bit. Trent Williams, of course, is the main guy. They didn't franchise tag him, which I thought was very interesting. He's one of the highly rated left tackles in the sport over years now. I mean, Pro Football Focus just loves that guy, and he seemed to have an outstanding first year for them. He does want to be paid. He wants to break the bank out there. And I think the Niners were maybe hoping they could get him a little bit more of a discounted rate than what he's asking, considering his age being about 32, 33 years old. Good chance at this point it looks like he might just reach the market and get out there and get that big deal that he's looking for. I'd say the same thing for Kerry Hyder. I don't think that the Niners are going to be able to re-sign him. I think he's a guy that's flown under the radar there for them for many years as a sort of backup defensive end and has had to sort of tread water while the named guys were up ahead of him. Got to finally play last year quite a bit and really showed out. Another guy who I think is going to make probably $7-8 million a year by somebody who really likes his tape, and I just don't think the Niners are going to spend that money. The other two guys I think that they're going to lose are going to be Jason Verrett and Richard Sherman. Sherman's been already basically told by the Niners they're not bringing him back. And then Verrett, he's a guy with so many injury concerns and is going to want to probably be making a little bit of money. Again, the Niners are just not really got the money, I think, to really spend at this point on those particular guys. So they're going to lose some free agents this offseason. They are. I think they can make some other moves. It looks like the quarterback position is the one that they really want to try to kind of find their way on. I get the impression, though, they don't have a firm plan there yet in place on what they're looking to do. But they will get a little bit less talented from the aspect. They're going to lose some talent out the back end on this. Not a lot. It's not going to be a complete, horrific. And they got young guys that are developing like Kinlaw, who I expect to get a little bit better and be more impactful moving into a second and third year. But they do need to do some work this offseason. They need to figure out their quarterback situation above all else, though. Maxwell Stern says, how did the Saints tag Marcus Williams? They must not know what the cap is. They say, cap schmap. We don't listen to your dirty cap. I don't know, man. Other than June 1st seems to be the time period that you have to get under the cap by, Maxwell. So they're going to get their job and get their work done inside that June 1st period. You can potentially try to sign him at that point to a multi-year deal, maybe get him out from under the cap. Maybe they're planning on doing that, Maxwell, and that they just need a little bit more time to get the negotiations finished up with them on that. But the Saints are certainly marching to their own kind of beat, aren't they? The cap does not seem to exist in their universe. Randall McDaniel, thoughts on Hassan Reddick from Arizona? He had a breakout year in 2020, 12.5 sacks. Plus, he did that without Chandler Jones taking up blockers. Is he like Bud Dupree of the outside linebacker in a 3-4? He's probably best suited to be like an outside linebacker in a 3-4, Randall, more than he is to be a 4-3 guy that puts his hand down in the dirt. Took him a while to figure out what to do with that guy. He came out of college and he was one of those guys, jack of all trades, master of none. And so it was hard to find an exact place to put him at. As I understand it, with those 12.5 sacks last year, a lot of those sacks came in just a couple of games. He just sort of had these, I think he had one game, like 5.5 sacks or something last year. I would be hesitant to trust that production from him. He's just not historically been a very efficient or effective pass rusher necessarily. Now, pass rushers can develop a little bit later on, but the kicker for me, as you spoke to, he's really best suited in the outside 3-4. So whether or not he's finally reached and attained that high-end point or not, still not exactly a scheme fit for what we do. Would you like to get Jonnu Smith? Asks Enrique. I really like him. Enrique, I like Jonnu Smith too. I'm a big Jonnu Smith supporter in that respect. Yeah, I'd be okay with it. I was really impressed by his film, more than I thought I was going to be by watching it. I dug into a lot of the Titans tape on this, and Jonnu Smith is a complete tight end. He's a young guy. Yeah, he's going to cost a little bit of money, but he's a guy you can do a lot of different things with. He's got a lot of different skills in him. He could be very useful in this offense and helping your offense out. A lot of ways to help. Sam Z says, do I move Damian Lewis to center? One of the weird things for me, Sam, throughout this offseason to listen to is to hear folks wanting to move Damian Lewis around. It's been years since we've drafted a high-end offensive lineman. It's been years since we finally found an offensive lineman with Pro Bowl potential. It's been years of watching offensive linemen played out of position, outside of the natural position that they should have been played at. Justin Britt, Ethan Posick, Jermaine Ifedi. These didn't work. So seeing that now, you have a lot of Seahawks fans who go, okay, so let's move Damian Lewis. Wait, what? Why? You got a guy set up at a position, a young guy, a cheap young guy at a position. Why move him from that? Why not leave him at right guard, which is his best suited position? That's what he's a natural fit for, is the right guard position. No, I wouldn't move him off from that. I would keep him at right guard. There's a lot of centers out there on the free agent market you could pick from, not just Corey Linsley. I'd probably go that route instead. Yami, how you doing, Yami? Good to see you. Good to see you. Lance Johnson, Carolyn Schneider having a first-round grade on Parkinson is the kiss of death. I liked him as a prospect, but Lance, I'm with you on this. I mention it as a, it is what it is on that type of thing. I didn't see anything about him that spoke to me as first-round talent. I guess they must have just saw Costello throwing him the ball out of Stanford, and Costello was one of the most painful quarterbacks in recent history of watching tape on and trying to judge prospects with him tossing them the football. But I saw no real wow factor to Parkinson's game that jumped out to me that made why you'd want a first round grade on him. I mean, even in his 40, he ran a 4.7 240 at his pro day or at the combine. I mean, that's not that fast. So maybe he'll show out in this season, but it didn't give me a lot of didn't encourage me a ton either. I'm hoping it was something, Lance, that I just didn't see on the tape. Maxwell Stern says, who do I think is the most underrated player in this draft? What a great question, man. What a great question. Let me give a thought to this now. I'm going to go boring with you. And it's just because I'm still thinking this through all the way. But I think the guy that jumps out to me, it's not a first-round guy because I think the first-round guys are pretty well slated. But I'm going to say David Moore out of Grambling. I think David Moore has almost star potential at the guard position. You just have to make the projection that the level of competition he was playing against at Grambling will be able to translate to the NFL level. And I think it will be able to translate because of how good a Senior Bowl week he had, where he was rated essentially by the Senior Bowl defensive lineman as the best offensive lineman that week. I think that's telling. His tape is absolutely awesome. He is just churning guys out play after play, blasting guys off the ball. He's athletic. He can move, do what you need to do from the left guard position, I think. He's a guy who I think is a little bit, he's got like a third-round grade right now. I think he's more of kind of a second-round guy. I think J.C. Horn is another guy who's right now slotted to be a guy maybe falls into the second round or late first round. I'm not so certain that he isn't a guy that shouldn't be a top 15 pick. I think J.C. Horn has a lot of skill at the cornerback position, a lot of skill. So those would be probably the two off the top of my head. And then maybe Rondell Moore would be maybe another guy who's probably just going to get dinged because he's 5'9", but just an amazing football player. And I think Sam Z brings up a good guy. Devontae Smith is really slipping down boards, and this is a guy that does have star potential. You worried about his frame, but he has star potential. I mean, you end up picking up a star wide receiver at where he's probably going to slot to be picked up at, which is probably, he could fall into the late teens even maybe even the late teens. Because he's going to go behind Jamar Chase. He's going to go behind Jalen Waddle, which puts him as the third wide receiver off the board. But I think he's being a little bit underrated at this point. I think it's swung with him as well. KJ says Yannick Ngakoue is way younger than Carlos Dunlap, though. That is very much a true statement. Very much a true statement. But he would be a little bit pricier. He would. And probably more multiple-year commitment with him, KJ, too. I think he wants the 3-4 year deal here on the open market, and I think some team will probably give him that deal. He's not going to break the bank, but he's going to make a fair bit of change. Seahawks Gaming, what if Seattle signed Malcolm Butler? Butler's been more in a man scheme-based system, going back to New England, going back to Tennessee. He's not a zone corner. He wouldn't work in a zone-based scheme, in my opinion. Sam Z trade for Danielle Hunter? ? Depends on the cost, Sam. I think he had some back surgery stuff going on last year. That always gets me worried. Them back surgery guys are always worrisome to me. So it depends on where his health is at, and then what are we looking at as the cost? Probably not at this point, Sam, because you have a plethora of defensive ends and pass rushers on the open market that you're going to be able to get for pennies on the dollar. Why trade for a lot of draft capital then for a guy that you could find the equivalency on at probably a much cheaper rate in the draft? Without, not the draft, but in the free agent class, without the injury concerns. UE2K, most underrated players in this draft are tight end Tommy Tremble and Alaric Jackson. Well, I like both of those two guys. I think with Tommy, definitely. Tommy, it's just a matter of they didn't put enough film out there with Notre Dame featuring him enough, which is part of why I think he's being so undervalued. But I would add him to that list as well. Alaric, I'm not so sure on. I'm not so sure on Alaric necessarily, but I'm with you on Tommy. KJ says, I think we try Blair at cornerback. He's not going to be able to probably play outside corner in the system. I think it was going to be a tough fit for him even at the slot position. But no, I don't think he's an outside guy. He's never played outside cornerback. I don't know that he would slide there now after just coming off an ACL injury. Sam says, can we trade for Brandon Scherf? Not likely to happen, Sham. This is something I've kind of hammered on a bunch here on this live stream show a bit, which is the fact that there's a difference between right guards and left guards, much like there's a difference between left tackles and right tackles. Right tackles are becoming more valued in the league. Teams are now starting to pay right tackles, whereas before right tackles would always be that Breno Giacomini type that's just like you get by with over on the right side. So we're starting to move in a direction now where they are drawing some value. But the difference on this is you already have a right guard in Damian Lewis. Damian Lewis is not a left guard. Damian Lewis is not a center. So if you trade for Brandon Scherf, you're going to have to move one of Scherf or Damian Lewis to a different position and then pay Scherf on top of it. Now, Scherf's a right guard. So hard to see why you'd want to bring in Scherf, pay him all that money, and then move him to a different position, right? Okay, so now we're talking about moving Damian Lewis, who's the first lineman we've drafted in about 9 years who actually has Pro Bowl potential, and you're going to move him off his position after an outstanding first season. I don't know that that's the smartest way to build this offensive line, in my opinion. To me, the much better route is don't have to give up the trade capital, the trade assets, just go sign Joe Thuney and keep Damian Lewis at the right guard. Thomas Cox says Belichick would have traded Wagner already. Agreed. You would not have given him the last contract extension. He would have moved on from him before that. Sam, what's it take? Move on from a top 6 linebacker for a second rounder? They might. I don't know if you're getting a second rounder for Bobby at this point. I've thought for a while that the best you can get for him is probably a third rounder at this point, considering the base salary he's carrying and the fact that middle linebackers are just not over. They're not valued. They're depressed. Like the safety market, they're a little depressed. Seahawks gaming, not going to lie, the Steelers had us in the first half. First half of what? 312. Big Ben is still a top 3-5 quarterback. He started off the season playing at an MVP level. Top 3 to 5 quarterback? Really, 312? Come on now. I know you're trolling me, right? Big Ben right now is not a top 3 to 5 quarterback in the sport right now. He's not. No way. D-Nugget. What's up, D-Nugget? Sam, Seattle terrible. Yami, you don't have a running game. Sorry, Yami. D-Nugget says, why get rid of Dunlap? He's awesome. I think it's to free up money, D-Nugget, for another corresponding move. What that move is, Russ trade, signing of an offensive lineman to start out free agency, to get a couple guys for the same cost, I don't know. But I think it's to do there's another corresponding move here. 312. You're hitching your horses to that Roethlisberger cart, man. I think you're going to be disappointed by it. That milk is soured. That milk's gone bad. Jeff, another $5 donation. Thank you, Jeff. You're awesome, bro. I appreciate you. This is a random question. If we trade Russ this year and don't get someone like Mac back in return or build the team up, does Adams maybe find a way to leave Seattle? Thoughts? I think, Jeff, all cards have got to be on the table this offseason. I've mentioned it's like there's no sacred calves. Nobody that's just untouchable that you don't look at as a possibility of moving on from, especially if you move on from Russ. And now you're absolutely in a position of, probably needing to look a year or two out from getting back to a point of really competing and pushing back again for Super Bowls. So that would put Adams on the table if he does move, if a team is willing to throw you some draft capital to make it happen. Do I think it's a likely scenario that he goes? No, I think that they're going to probably end up signing Adams to more of a contract extension at this point, because if you do trade him, you're just going to be buying into this sunk cost fallacy, which is essentially that just by holding on to him, we're holding on to an asset that we're trying to get the return back for what we gave up for, but we'll never get that back. We're just in this hopes of constantly chasing that back. But at that point, then you're selling short because you're really only going to get about a first round pick, maybe a first and a fifth back or something for him, as opposed to giving up the 2 firsts and a third. And I hate going that route. I really do, Jeff, as far as it's just in team building. That's a bad way to team build. But again, we may be kind of coming from a scratch state here to a degree, making it down, especially you move on from Russ. I have to relook at this all the way around. And so, that does go that route. I will say this, if it's not Mac, Jeff, you are getting other corresponding players from the Bears. They do have some assets they can add into it back to you, being Cody Whitehair is a guy who could be a very effective center or left guard for you in this scheme. He's another guy they could target. So he mentioned Jalen Johnson, Roquan Smith, maybe. There's some things you could maybe look in as guys to do here. D-Nugget says, no matter what, I'll be heartbroken if Russ leaves. It'll be hard to watch games after that. I agree, man. It's going to, like I said, there's going to be a mourning period. I've called it, D-Nugget, a mourning period. We'll have to all kind of get over it. Sam says, will Reed go for 10-plus sacks? He needs an outside rusher. We saw that with Carlos Dunlap. He needs a guy that's going to scoot that quarterback back up into the front of the pocket where Reed can clean up. Reed's not really a guy who's going to just beat his man off the line with some crazy move or get off. He's going to do it with effort, strength, power. He's a collapse the guy kind of pocket guy. So he needs an outside guy, and it's going to be dependent on that, Sam. If he has a guy like Dunlap out on the outside for a full season, I think he can absolutely push for a 10-sack season, as he did with Frank Clark back in, 2018. Lance Johnson just pulled the trigger on Russ to Jets for the number 2 overall pick, 23rd pick, 34th pick, and Quinn Williams, plus the next 5 years of 5th-round picks. I love that last part you threw in there, Lance. That's awesome. 5th-round picks, we get stuff done in the 5th round, don't we, bro? I think that trade, if Russell Wilson was willing to have that trade happen, I think the deal would be done. I think the problem here goes that Russ doesn't want to necessarily go to the New York Jets. It's an organization, franchise-wise, that's not been run really right over recent years. I don't know if he trusts that decision-making from the top down at that one. And then you got a defensive-minded coach, Lance. Does he want to go play for another defensive-minded coach, having played for Coach Carroll for 10 years? I don't think so. 312, Russ is not coming to Pittsburgh. No chance, no way, man. Keep dreaming. Keep dreaming. Maxwell says, will we ever get good news this offseason? It's all depressing right now. Facts, man. It's the truth, brother. It's the truth. I'm hoping so. It's been one of the more miserable starts to the offseason that I can remember. No lie about it, man. It is. There's room for this to turn around. I'm not down in the dumps on it, but boy, it's been a brutal pill to swallow here so far. Will we make a trade? Asked Sam. I would think there's some trade coming somehow. I don't know where it's going to come from, though. We don't have any indicators. Front office has been pretty quiet about the direction they're going to go. And no, we're not going to trade for Nick Bosa. Would I trade Russ for Lawrence straight up? No, not straight up, because I got to eat $39 million. So they need to kick more into the deal than just that. Seahawks Gaming says, I think it's time to call Josh McCown. I think he's a coach now. He's a coach down there in Houston. Yami says, have you seen the AFC West? It's like the East where 3 teams just exist to make the one other one the number 1 seed. It has been a little bit of that recently for them in the AFC West. I think Oakland's doing a little bit better, at least getting to a state of being mediocre off being bad. And I think the Chargers are interesting now when you factor in Justin Herbert, I think is a legitimate prospect. So they're on the rise. It's not going to be as easy as it's been for Kansas City up until this point. Denver still is figuring it out. I mean, they still don't have really a functional plan in place, I might argue. But 2 of those teams are going to be tougher, I think. Matt Games, how you doing, Matt Games? He says, do you think we'll re-sign Shaquille Griffin? No, Mac, I'd expect him to go get paid out on the open market. I think they're looking to re-sign him. They would have done it by this point. If they really liked his value, they would have franchised him. I think that they think that he's going to get overpaid out on the open market, and it's a price tag that the Seahawks are not willing to spend on a guy that, there's some people that like him, some people don't. I'd say at his best, he's a league average cornerback. Do you get very far as an NFL football team paying a league average quarterback anywhere from $8 to $12 million a year? No, that's probably not a good way to roster build. So I don't think it's going to probably happen. Sam Z, Saints' chances of winning the South without Drew? Depends if they get Jameis Winston back with them or not. I think Jameis Winston could be interesting with Peyton there. I'm not sold 100% on him, but it could be interesting. But probably not. They're going to have to probably tear a lot of that team down, Sam, which will probably bring it down to where the talent level is just not. They've been a very complete team for years now. You're not going to be able to say that about them next year, I don't think. Another one, you could chew Xylanton gum instead of aspartame. It's always making my gut feel weird with that Xylanton stuff. It's always like I just have a weird after kind of feeling in my gut. I'm not all that into gum anyway, another one. to be honest with you. It was always a little overrated for me. You two kids, with or without Russ, we got to get a center, left guard, tight end, running back, wide receiver, cornerback, and defensive end. I agree. Matt Games, I think a left tackle that could swing out to right tackle as a prospect would be your ideal situation there. So you could have a little bit of protection against the Dwayne Brown injury, and then another guy to maybe push Brandon Shell over there to the right tackle position. Matt Games says we have DK, Tyler Lockett, David Moore, and Freddie Swain. If NFL ever decides to let it happen, we also have Josh Gordon on contract. Yep. Be fairly solid if you can get Josh Gordon back in the mix. I would like to see him if they have Russell Wilson going into next season, Matt, getting a solid third receiver, getting a guy that's not just a guy that's like David Moore or Freddie Swain, but a legitimately talented guy out there. Guy with some upside. D-Nugget says Russ leaves and wins 2 more Super Bowls. Pete drives the team into the ground and retires. Jody sells the team to Oklahoma. Oh, man. You're thinking dark, D-Nugget. Thinking dark. Lawrence, Henderson, and Allen for Wilson. Yeah, I would take that. I'd take that, Sam. Yeah. I'd be okay with that. I thought Henderson was the best corner in last year's draft. Yami, I was thinking something like that too lately. What will Jody do when Pete retires? Sell to Elon Musk, who just wants a team to piss off Jeff Bezos? Maybe. I don't know on this one. Stan over at the Seahawks Draft Blog is reporting that he's heard in the wind that the team will be sold within 2 to 3 years. So we'll see how it goes. I think the folks that are out there that are worried that the Seahawks are going to be sold and then moved out of Seattle, I get why you're worried about the organization being moved out. We've had a lot of our franchises pulled out of the door before, and right up at the doorstep of being pulled from the city. Then we watched our Sonic team actually pulled from the city. So I get where the fears come from. I understand, okay? But we have a lease signed with the new stadium there, and taxpayers paid for that stadium money, so the team can't move for like another 20 years. So Seahawks are here for at least the next 20 years. Doesn't matter who owns the team. There's no way to get out of that lease agreement. Sam Z says, Levante David, the best linebacker in football. I don't know if I like White better on their team, to be honest with you, Sam. I think White is an ascending superstar at the linebacker position. I might go Fred Warner over that, but he's right up there. D-Nugget says, Russ is so associated with the Hawks and Seattle brand, it will be hard to see him on another team, basically Montana at the Chiefs. Yeah, it will be a tough one. D-Nugget, in your opinion, why is Tom Brady good? Tom Brady is good, obviously work ethic, but beyond work ethic, I would argue working on the right things and understanding the right elements of his game that he needed to build up in order to maintain and be an elite quarterback through his late 30s and early 40s. He mastered parts of his game that are the thinking aspects of the football game. Pre-snap mastery, total control over the offense, and his ability to adjust things on the fly and to make it fit and make it work. An ability to throw with anticipation as good as anybody in the game. He doesn't need to see you wide open. He knows if you're even, you're leaving. These things that he's gotten really good with, and better over the years, frankly. The spread concepts and the spread formations, he really embraced that model and how to be good in that model, I think, when it was just kind of coming out onto the scene. Obviously maintains his body, maintains his health. That's a big part of it, man. You know, the no partying, the just toeing the line, avocado ice cream, all that type of stuff that Brady supposedly does. I think that helps, but it's the thinking. It's the stuff in your head that you're able to do as you get older and lose your physical skill that will determine longevity. And I think that is the single biggest key for Brady as he's gotten forward. As Sam says, he's the hot route master. He can adjust a receiver at any time to go any direction he needs them to go, and he'll make the right call seemingly every time on that. He's never wrong. Goatriots, 312. Yeah, Goatriots, 312's in here with some Steeler loving. He's got me a little shocked with the Roethlisberger take. I would have thought all Steeler fans by this point would be completely out on Ben. I thought they would be at that spot. So he must be one of the last remaining guys holding out. Jeff Rhines, yeah, it would be tough to see Russ leave. But what would be extra painful would be having him leave and win a Super Bowl first or second season away from the Hawks. Yeah, there's no part of that feels good, is there, Jeff? There isn't. You can make the argument, though, as long as that there's a Coach Carroll here and Carroll wants to do things and how he wants to do things, that whether Russ has the ability in his heart and his physical gift still to get it done, to go win a Super Bowl, that because of the philosophy difference, it could never happen here because of that. It's part of what draws me towards the thought process that it may be the best thing just because of that disconnect or the conflict between the two of them and how they see the proper way to win at this point. UE2K, Russ will only be regarded poorly in Seattle. Rest of the country agrees with Russ and sees his demands as reasonable. Pete think the Seahawks would be crazy to trade him and take a $39 million cap hit. UE, I think there's a lot of folks out there nationally that do feel that way. I do think that there's a lot of nationally also that have kind of said a little bit of also on the other side of it, that aren't as much in looking through this lens of Russ as just this saintly figure who's being done completely dirty by the organization. So I think there's a little bit of difference opinion, even nationally speaking, not just locally. You're probably right. Overall, nationally, it does lean in the direction of Seattle is crazy for even thinking of trading him and et cetera, et cetera. So they're probably the majority, but I think there's a fairly loud contingent on the other side to go, we'll see. Sam says Godwin for a second. No, because you're going to you have to pay him, Sam. And if you're going to have to pay him, you're looking at $17, $18 million a year for this guy. I love him as a player, but I got Lockett $11 million. DK is going to be paid in another year from now. You don't have the money to spend. You don't have the cap space to spend between three receivers, you're spending like 45, 50 million after next year. You can't do that with where the cap's at right now. 2K says Dickinson might slip to the third, but we don't pick again until the fourth. Yeah, you'd have to trade up to get into him at that point. That's for sure. Though I think we will be, if we just sit where we're at right now with our draft picks, I think we're going to take the second rounder and trade back. You'd probably trade into the top of the third round and pick up an extra third round pick to do it. Sam Z says, why is Ethan Posick was always one-on-one with Aaron Donald? I don't know. I can't give you a good answer on that. There's too often, I would say, our offensive line scheme in the previous scheme was far too reliant on asking our offensive linemen to block elite defensive players one-on-one too often. There's not enough double teaming, not enough chipping at the offensive line, in my opinion, by some of the running backs and tight ends with what we ask him to do. And we've seen it especially with Donald. This is why Donald has more sacks against Russell Wilson than anyone else. Because over that time period, he's been dominant, but over that time period, Seattle's also been very reluctant to put a double team down on Donald play in and play out. It is a little harder to double team the three tech, so it is a little, just from schematics wise, it's not always the easiest thing to do, but for certain special players like that, I think you got to make exceptions. And as Yami said, I agree with what he says too, where he says the Rams are really good at putting Donald in 1v1 situations with the opponent's worst offensive lineman. Yeah, they've done a great job as Donald's gone on in his career, as moving him around that defensive line, including even putting him at defensive end. I think they've done a really good job of opening their mind up on how to use him. Rams D-line's loaded. It is, Sam. I do think they're going to lose Leonard Floyd this offseason. They may even lose a Michael Brockers too as well. So they are going to be a little bit lighter in the pants moving into next year. Thomas Cox, have you looked at Rashad Bateman? Eskridge is on my list, Thomas, and I keep meaning to get around to him. I watched a little of his highlights, but it just didn't get enough of a feel for him quite yet. I did watch Rashad Bateman. He's one of those prospects, especially at the receiver position, that I'm struggling to understand the upside on him as much, where people are saying this is a first-round pick. And I like the body control. I like the release pretty good. There's nothing he does sensationally. Good hands, not amazing hands. When you look at the other first-round receivers that are going to go, be it Waddle, be it Chase, be it Javonte Smith, even Rondale Moore, they've just got some special attributes to their game that really pop off the tape. With Rashad Bateman, I don't have as much that pops off the tape. I think I've got to go back on him, Thomas, and watch a little bit more of him, watch a couple more of his games and get a little bit of a better idea of why he's being hyped up as much as he is. Pro Football Focus loves him. There's a lot of people out there that are very high on him. He seems to be one of those guys. There's a couple prospects in this draft I would point to that I'm currently right now not able to quite get on board with understanding why they're as highly rated as they are. Zach Wilson's one of those guys I've got to figure out why it is I'm missing him as so much as far as when I look at the tape versus what people are saying of him. I would offer this is a similar case with Rashad Bateman, a guy I should probably have a better understanding for why I'm not higher on him than I should be with the skill set that he kind of has. But there's just not him and Terrace Marshall, two guys that are highly rated receivers in this draft. With both of them, they've got good skill sets. There's not a lot of holes to their game, but there's just not a lot of real wow factor there either. There's not, for picking where you're going to be picking high first round or high second round. I need a few plus attributes that you're bringing to the table. And I don't know if they do, but I will. Eskridge is one of the next guys on my list, Thomas. So by the next stream, I will have you. I'll break down on Eskridge. But Bateman, great body control, good hands, very good at manipulating his body in routes in order to get open. Refined route runner, and there's not a lot of real refined route runners in this draft. Javonte Smith's one of them, but you got some rougher guys that just get by with their physical gifts. Kind of, he's more of a guy that truly is understands what he's doing out there at the receiver position. I like that part of him. I got to figure it out. Floyd's a top 10 pick. Which Floyd? I'm blanking on the Floyd. I probably should know what you're saying on that one, but I'm blanking. Go Hawks, Sam. Huey in a split, Russell wins the short term definitely. His new team will be 4 to 5 games better, and Seahawks will struggle in the NFC West with the worst quarterback in the division. I do think the second part of that's true. We don't know if Russell's going to make the team better, going where he's going to go. I think saying that with an absolute certainty and knowing that that's an absolute fact, I don't know that necessarily. We'll see. Sam says, I never understood running out of gun with our O-line. Well, I think a little of that was to placate towards Russell. When you get him out of shotgun, he's already back behind the offensive line a good amount, so he can see very quickly off the snap what's going on before guys are back in his kitchen. I think that's beneficial to Russell as much as anything. The new offensive coordinator coming in is going to do a lot more under center stuff, so we're going to look a little bit more traditional in that respect as we go forward. Sam said Lewis has 12 penalties. Yep. He definitely had some parts of his game he's got to smooth out, Sam, but he also made the all-rookie team on the offensive line. I don't know the last I don't think we've had one offensive lineman in Coach Carroll's career here that's made the all-rookie team. Yeah, he had, gave up, I think, 3 sacks in total throughout the year, 12 penalties, but he was a road grader on the line, and he's a guy that I think is going to develop further and get better and better and better. D Nuggets says, sadly, the only sacred, untouchable cow is Carroll, ironically. True. Very true. D Nuggets says, if we trade Russ, then start sucking, will Schneider stick around? I think Schneider understood very well what he was getting into signing his contract extension this offseason, D Nugget. I don't expect him to go anywhere. And I think Schneider also has an eye towards the date that Carroll retires. He gets to fully take over then at that point as the big head in charge. D Nugget says, will Russ succeed outside Seattle? Will Pete succeed without Russ? Pete has had success without Russell Wilson in his coaching career. He did in USC. Russell Wilson had success in his playing career at Wisconsin without Pete Carroll. Both of these guys have flourished without the other in the past. Yeah, they both could succeed without the other. I don't know if it's a certainty either way, though. I don't know if you can say, I just know because Russell's such a great quarterback, is kind of he was saying there, that he's going to be worth 4 to 5 wins. And likewise, I don't know if Pete Carroll, because he's such a motivator of men and knows how to team build, is going to be able to bring this team back to a relevant status again. I'm not certain of either of those. Part of one of the reasons I've said D Nugget, the best place for both of these two guys, their best future, in my opinion, is together, because you know what you have when everything's rolling right together. If you can just get on that same page, it's more of a matter of get yourselves on the same page than it is look for the breakup. But that's just been more of my personal take on it. Space, how you doing, Space? I lost your spot. Hey, there's Space. And then, oh, what's going on with Carson? Asked Space. He's going to be a free agent. You know, that Seattle wasn't looking to sign him. They don't have the money to spend on him, Space. I think somebody else is going to give him more money. Kind of what it is. I think this team's in a place where they understand the running back position needs to be one of those positional groups on this team that you don't spend money on. When you have a $200 million cap, $180 million cap, you got to choose positional groupings that you're going to go a little cheaper on. That's just that's the reality of what we're all dealing with. And you can't pay everybody. So you got to pick certain position groups you can go cheaper on. My opinion is at this point, this team is looking in the direction of going cheaper at running back and going cheaper at cornerback. Those are two units that they've decided that they can go a little cheaper on because of some of the nature of things. Specifically, running back, you can get a talented running back later in the draft, and specifically on the corner position, being that you play zone so much and you're not as reliant on needing a guy that's going to be sticky in man-on-man coverage. Seahawks Gaming, Jared Cook with Chef Russell. Jared sure is getting older, but he's been a very productive tight end in this league. Because of the way the Steelers assess talent and draft, they are more likely than Seahawks to commit to building their offensive line and drafting a top running back. Equals Travis Etienne, Najee Harris, or even Javonte Williams. I could see that. They tried to go with a little bit of the cheaper, so you had Le'Veon Bell was a guy that they picked, I think, originally around the first round, or might have been a second round guy. High pick at that point, right? Then they try to go with Connor, who's a fifth round guy that they take. So they try to go more of the cheaper route then with his last selection. Didn't really work great with Connor, sort of limited as a running back. Do they switch back over at UE back to go into needing the talented guy and spending the resources to get that talented guy? I tend to agree with you. They probably do. They probably do. Rip, breaking news. Marshawn Lynch comes back in 2021. That'd be stoked, Rip. It'd be awesome to hear, man. Space has 7 rings. I want to puke. Voodoo Magic, what kind of contract would you sign Aldon Smith to? I'd be willing to sign Aldon Smith to like a 2-year, $12 million deal. I might even go $1 million or $2 million above that, but not much further past that, Voodoo. I mean, he had a very good year last year. He didn't set the world on fire, but it was a good bounce back year, and I still like the guy's talent quite a bit. He's not an old guy. He came in this league really young, so he's, I think, still just late 20s at this point. But I'd be okay with a 2-year deal. I think he'd be a pretty effective rusher for you. But I want him in that 6, 7, maybe I'd go up to $8 million a year range, but I'd want to be in by that 5, 6, 7 ranges. That's where I feel better at. Seahawks Gaming, which is the best ability, hot router, master, or escape artist? Well, it comes with a little bit of a caveat, doesn't it, Seahawks Gaming? Because one of those abilities can last throughout your career. Another one of those abilities starts to fall off about early 30s. So early 30s, if you're a sack escape artist, Lamar Jackson right now at 22, 23, 24, 25, and the way he's moving, it's not going to be the same way he's going to be moving at 32, 33 years old. So we have yet to see an escape artist who's an escape artist at 36, 37, 38. You slow down at that point. So, it's nice to be an escape artist and probably a more valuable skill, but it has a shorter shelf life. And it's one that is relying on your guys staying healthy enough to be able to scramble around. Gets beat up, loses some of that ability to move around. He's not going to be able to fall back on the hot route master stuff. Where's the hot route? I've just changed my own mind on the Seahawks Gaming. I want the hot route master. I want the guy that can be a master picking up blitzes, a master of knowing what to do when he gets attacked with blitzes. I want a guy that makes any team that tries to blitz him pay the price and get to a place where they don't even have the gall to try to blitz at that point. That's what I would look towards. Najee Eastwick, I guess the Hawks are going to run it back with the same team plus a couple stopgap vet pass rushers, Mayoa and Bruce Irvin. I don't know how the Hawks can improve the team with draft picks. We'll see, Najee. Remember, there's going to be a lot of guys available on this open market, and defensive end and pass rushers is going to be the deepest class of free agents that are out there. So I share your thoughts on being a little bit maybe perturbed with what you're looking at in the situation, but do have just a tiny bit of faith because it's not necessarily certain at this point they can't build this team up in other ways, being that there's so many players available for pennies on the dollar. In utero, we will see a record amount of free agents very soon. I'm very curious to see the direction the Hawks go. Seeing what they choose to address first should be very telling as far as Russ goes, right? Yeah, I think every move they make right now as we go through gives us a very clear indication towards Russ. I think so. I think so. Just as I think that there's a little bit of that with Dunlap. I mean, Dunlap being cut like that it's a bit of an indicator that maybe you're going this Russ direction because he was the biggest the biggest chunk of change you could cut off the current roster to start the process of cutting out to that $39 million money mark they got to hit to get out and clear that space through. 24. Oh, yes, do please slam on that like button if you happen to be watching here. I keep forgetting to ask. Thanks, Jeff, for mentioning that. It does help me out grow if you do. Just all you get is just tap that little like button. If you like what you're hearing, of course. I don't want to force it if you're not liking it. Paul Manning, do you feel Dallas will be an NFC competitor? No, I don't, Paul. No, I don't. You know, their time to make hay while the sun was shining was when they had Dak Prescott on a rookie deal. And then they went and took a couple extra years beyond that. And now they're going to have to be paying him up at the $42 million territory. And sure, they're going to save some money this season and try to go for it again this year. But they have an offensive line that's getting very old and is not as talented as it once was. Ezekiel's now only another year older. I certainly like their receivers. But defensively, what is it that gets me excited about them defensively? No guarantee they bring back Aldon Smith, who might have been their best defensive lineman last year. DeMarcus Lawrence hasn't been the same since he got that big deal. Jalen Smith, same thing there. I don't know that they've got any near the talent to do it. Now, I will say this, Paul, they certainly will be a competitor in the NFC East because the NFC East has just got nobody that's a clear-cut team ready to jump into the fray on that one. But it's almost like default, isn't it, at that point, Paul? They're almost the lead runner by default. Cool. All right, so we've got... I think I caught up on the chat. We are live. So we got here going. I highly doubt Dunlap's coming back. I think we are rolling the dice that Darrell Taylor will be good. Well, and I think it's Wiki Games. It's a little bit more of I think they're gonna get another veteran pass rusher from somebody else. The key with this is that Dunlap and Taylor really do play kind of two positions within the scheme. Dunlap is going to be more of your 4-5 technique, the left defensive end, right? He's going to be the guy that you'd have rotating in there with LJ Collier. Whereas Taylor is going to be more of your traditional Leo right defensive end. So I don't know if one is necessarily impacted by the other per se, but I do think, yeah, it's probably, it probably means that they feel good about Darrell Taylor at least a little bit. But again, I think there's going to be a lot of defensive ends available, Wiggy. So many defensive ends available that you can go out there and pick up this offseason. It's going to be a deep class. In Utero says, I was so happy to hear about Dak's massive deal. Bye-bye, Dallas. Yeah. They're going to have such a hard time with this one. And they created this problem themselves. They could have paid him after year 3 and done right by him, locked him into probably $28-29 million a year and called it a day. But they had just made their determination, their mind that maybe he's not worth that. Why do we got to pay these quarterbacks this? I thought Dallas was going to be one of the first real teams with foresight that I've been predicting are going to come down the track here at some point or another, who are going to finally firmly decide, to hell with this, we've got to pay the quarterback because everybody else is doing it thing. The data doesn't align with that being a smart decision-making process for team building. Instead, let's go to alternate route B or alternate route C. That's what I thought Dallas was looking to do here with this Dak thing, just to get as much as they could and then move on down the road. But it seemed they've done the other deal. They went all in. And I think that they are mortgaging a lot of that future there as they go forward. I mean, you got 2 years from now, you're at $25 million on Amari, and you're going to be $43-44 million deep on Dak. That's a lot of price for just 2 players at that point for a cap that's yet to really increase much here, or looks to be increasing very much as we move forward. Jarl, how you doing, Jarl? I think the football team will win at the NFC East. Ron Rivera is a good coach, young quarterback, good defensive line. Quarterback is going to be the key for them, Jarl. I mean, what do they got there? Is that I know they signed that kid to that little contract who had a good little postseason, but it's a lot to count on a young man like that, rather than going out there and getting a certain quarterback to bring into play to really, give your young team a chance. But that defensive line is one of the better defensive lines in the league, might be just behind Tampa Bay as far as talent. So and as I've said, man, you can win in the trenches. Your trenches are good and you can win there. And certainly you look at Washington, they're not bad in the trenches either. Offensive line's okay. But again, there might be a team that just wins it by default, because nobody in that NFC East is really looking like a game-changing type team that's really on the rise and looks like it's ready to fully compete. The Giants could maybe get there, but I'm not as certain with them yet. And I'm certainly not sold on Daniel Jones at this point. Do you not get some Dallas will only have enough money for just one side of the football? Yeah, they might have just trying to go offensive heavy, but they've got to pay the quarterback now, man. You pay the quarterback, and it's a whole new ball game. It's a whole new ball game when you're paying your quarterback top of the market money. We've watched it here for the last 4 or 5 years now. You know, it's just, it's a new world when you're in that situation of things. All right, T. Well, I think we've caught up on the chat here. 3 hours and 30 minutes in. Pop in. Let's go ahead with your last couple of questions. I'm going to try to get back here, I think, on Thursday or this weekend, depending on. We're going to kind of see what happens here this week, if there's any new news or if anything kind of breaks, get these cuttenings go on as I'm expecting. We're hearing it's supposed to be a lot of bloodletting happening. It hasn't happened yet. Teams are holding off, but it's supposed to be coming down the pike this week, according to numerous unnamed sources, whatever we can take from that. Huey says Dallas passed up on the opportunity to lead the don't pay the quarterback team. Jerry got scared what the fan base would say if Dak went to the 49ers or Bears or, God forbid, the Washington football team and won a Super Bowl. Agreed, Huey. Agreed. They seemed to be like they were going to start down the trek of that plan, like they were beginning to do we're not paying the quarterback. This is a dumb, broken model. It's not working. They showed all the indicators of being that type of team. But then now you could see them here over the last couple of years are not quite ready to fully go into that for, I think, the reasons that you describe. The fear sort of ends up driving you on that. And I would argue that in a lot of cases with these quarterbacks and signing them to the big money, it's the fear factor. You know, it's the we can't find ourselves in this position. I always maintain you never make your greatest decisions based out of fear. In fact, you tend to make most of your worst decisions when you're fear and scared. The fight or flight, you're going into the very small part of your brain and operating out of there. And I think that's a troubling place to operate out of. You're much better to be loose, free, and easy, aggressive. That's a much better place from my standpoint to try to team build and go for it. But I think they're going to rue this one a little bit. I think they're going to rue this one, 2K, on the Cowboys now they look at this. I think, too, they understood if we do move off from Dak, who's the quarterback we're going to go to? At 10, Trey Lance, Kellen Mond. Those are your two options there. You know, are you going to try to trade up and get into Wilson territory, Zach Wilson at that point? I don't know if they had the capital to go up there and do that where they're standing right now. I think that they got themselves backed up into a corner with that situation, and that you just never want to in this day and age, because once you do, now you're strapped down for 3 to 4 years and you are stuck. JS, damn, the stream was supposed to be short. I always say that, JS, but you guys have great questions and the talk gets so interesting and I get wrapped up into it. I can't help myself. Y2KJ, is Michael Dickinson on a Hall of Fame trajectory? No, he's not. Look, Ryan Nelson came out, I think, in Alabama as well. I think a couple of years ago was a much cleaner center prospect for the Colts. Ruiz was probably a little bit of a cleaner, even though he's not as physically as sort of tantalizing a prospect as Dickinson is. Ruiz was probably a little bit more of a cleaner prospect coming out as well. So he's not quite to that level, but as a guy that should be an upper level solid starter in this league, too, having Pro Bowl level potential, I think he's got that in him. And maybe even Hall of Fame trajectory at the end of the day. But I mean, I hate to always slap on Hall of Fame trajectory until we actually get a guy on the football field and see how he plays on Sundays. You know, you're making quite a leap, I think, to make that kind of prediction, you know. Jeff, thank you for the $5 donation. I think that's your third one today, my guy. Thank you so much for your support of the channel. It is very much appreciated. I salute you, and thank you, sir, very much. He says, thanks for the stream tonight, Brandon. Looking forward to the next one already. And never forget, go Hawks. I agree, Jeff, and thank you so much. We're going to get back around here real soon. Like I said, not on Thursday. I'll definitely be back on this weekend. I want to just see if we get a little bit more news breaking, a couple more new things to kind of talk over and turn over here. I'm going to dive a little bit more into the prospects here and kind of load up a little bit more on this draft as we got coming up. So we're going to get that rolling, but thank you again for that $5 donation. Thank you for all your donations today. We have a bunch of guys being very kind. I appreciate it, you guys. Please, if you are watching this as me in record and not live, do hit that like button. It does help this channel out tremendously. I do appreciate you subscribing and watching it ever. Let's see, we got Huey here with one more comment. But if you trade Russ to Browns and he wins in Cleveland, Schneider gets fired and GMs know that. You think that would get him fired? I don't know, man. Maybe they were offering him a couple years ago, supposedly, Huey, to Cleveland for the number 1 overall pick. So Schneider was willing to potentially make that move a couple years ago, but, you know, I don't believe they were really, truly offering him to the Browns at that time. So, you know, we'll see how it goes. All right, well, thank you, D Nugget, Y2K. I appreciate you guys for hanging on in there through the whole stream for me. My mods, thank you so much for handling shop and keeping things under control. We are now on Discord. You can find the description link here to the channel if you want to jump in Discord. We're going to start growing up that community a little bit, and I'm going to get some more things going on there. I think I'm going to do some film watching from in there on some of the scouting stuff because you can do some stream stuff from there. So it's kind of interested me from that standpoint on it. I do appreciate you guys watching. Thank you for all of your great comments and keeping the chat lively and going good. You guys are phenomenal as always coming in. I didn't even announce the stream was going to happen, but you guys bumped on in. Thank you so much for doing that. We're going to keep trying to get this consistently out on a consistent basis. I'm working through the schedule on that. So thank you very much for that. Please don't forget, it's been a tough offseason so far, man. A lot of you are in a little bit of sub-misery. I can feel it. A lot of you are in a depressive state. I can feel it. A lot of you are just hanging on for dear life saying, please, I don't want to be a loser for the next 5 years. I understand. I feel all these feelings in my heart too. I'm going through all of these roller coaster of emotions too. It's understandable. No matter what side of the fence you lie on, I want to keep Russ, no matter what, I'll give up my firstborn to make it happen versus I'm done with Russ and let's move on. It doesn't matter. There's a pain that we're all feeling in our heart as this thing mounts and builds up, and we're just looking for some good news. I feel like some good news is going to come. I feel like there's a light here some way, some form, somehow. Maybe it's just the optimism in my own heart here, but I do feel it. So hold on. Don't lose the faith. Keep the loyalty. Keep your fandom there. Don't bail on this team. Don't bandwagon. We're riding, baby. We're getting back to that mountaintop. I don't care how we got to do it. I appreciate you. I love you guys. I thank you very much. And don't you ever forget, don't you